comments? All those in favor say aye. Opposed is nay. Thank you very much. Afternoon, Madam Clerk. We only have a few items on our regular session, but we do have 3 committee meetings. So let's go ahead and get into these. We have a final reading finance. Does anybody have any questions about this item, 5A? All right, great. Madam Clerk, let's go to resolution 7A, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to refinance approximately $1,526,000 in U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Section 108, Guaranteed Loan Program Funds.
All right, seeing no lights on this item, B, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to enter into a service and licensing agreement with GovernmentJobs.com, DBA NeoGov, to provide HR software services for onboard and performance management systems in addition to the current recruitment and applicant tracking services for an initial term of 12 months with 2 options for annual renewal thereafter for an annual cost of $78,213.45.
Councilwoman Burrs.
Is Beverly here? HR here? Oh, okay, good. So what is this track?
I'm sorry, which track? Oh, it's for a contract to bring onboarding and performance management to the city.
And in English, what does that mean?
Sorry. Okay, onboarding is a process of bringing an employee on, so taking care of all the new hire paperwork, routing to all of the different sources like IT to set up their computers, all of those kind of things.
Okay,
That's
I know
onboarding.
what those terms mean, but I wanted them on the record. And the reason for that is the Mayor's Council for Women is looking at the city, at practices in general relative to age discrimination, gender discrimination, this sort of thing. Will that be tracking that? Can you pull from that the data?
Data about the ages of our employees or ages of applicants or?
Well, apparently, where some of the problems come is at the application time. Because you don't do face-to-face, you look at a person's age, you look at their all their qualifications, and some industries, and I'm sure you read all the national press, have been accused of ageism because of off-ramping and on-ramping, particularly with women, that because you never talk to a person, I'm not saying this is wrong, because the process is not to talk with a person face-to-face, you'll only look at their age, and there's a lot of assumptions that go on there, what their previous pay was, or what, I haven't seen the questionnaire, so I don't know exactly. And what we found so far, not relative, this questionnaire will be coming to you, is that there is a practice of ageism, which has little to do with age. It has to do with pension funding. It has to do with assumption of higher salaries, health insurance, which is discriminatory. So I'm wondering, is this going to track that so that we can make policies that address that whole gamut of ageism?
Well, age is not tracked. When a business partner looks at an application, they don't see the race of the employee, the age of the employee, or any of that. Any of those identifying characteristics are not actually on the application. They're on the applicant's master profile, of which the business partner doesn't look through.
Who's the business partner?
They used to be the generalists, so they are the ones that actually review our applications.
Somebody else does it. We don't do it directly.
The city does, yes. Our business partners do. They're called HR business partners, human resources business partners, and they are the employees who actually review all of the applications that come to the city.
Is that process outsourced?
No.
Okay, so help me understand what a business partner is.
A business partner is what formerly used to be a generalist. So they are the people that work in HR that support various departments in terms of,
Okay.
their
It's
employees.
a city employee.
That's right.
All right, so when people apply, you don't know their race, you don't know their ethnicity, you don't know any of that?
It doesn't appear on their actual computer application. It appears on their master profile, which is separate from their actual application for a specific job.
Okay. So if forgive me, but, Mr. Chair, but.
Please.
Okay. So, the city in no way can discriminate because of age, race, any of that, because we don't know that.
Now, I'm not I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
You
that's-
do have access to a master profile. My point is that it's not readily available on an application. Now, anybody who has access to NeoGov in the proper way can view somebody's master profile. But I'm going to venture to say that our business partners, given the number of applications they read through and given their integrity, they don't look at a master profile. They look at the application, they're looking at the skills, the experience, the education, whatever is applicable to that particular job, and that's what they're evaluating based on, not on the person's age, not on their race, or any of those characteristics.
Okay, that's great, because we're going to include this as part of our study, and that's why I'm getting it on record. That's good to know, because it's our understanding in some areas that we do look at that, not relative to age per se, but with an assumption someone may want more salary because they've been a former CEO, and therefore, we use the term overqualified, which I've never been able to figure out. How can somebody be overqualified for a job? That's a euphemism for, you may cost us too much in a pension plan, or you may cost us too much in health insurance. And I'm glad to know that the city isn't doing that.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, seeing no further lights on that item. Next up, we have a departmental report from the Chattanooga Police Department. Chief?
Thanks, Chairman. I have a PowerPoint
Get
somewhere.
the PowerPoint loaded, please.
Dramatic pause.
Do a little dance, do something for
Nobody
us,
wants
entertain
that.
us.
No,
nothing?
nobody wants me to do that.
I don't know. Who wants to see that?
No, this is not well, it is a democracy. No, that's not how this. Really? The one-footed guy in the corner is going to ask me to dance? Really? Thank you. Same format that I've been coming to the council with on a few previous iterations is sticking with an explanation of what's gone on within your police department in the last little while in each one of the three pillars. And that first one being community and problem-solving police. I think that means I'm supposed to hit my own slide. There we go. Focusing in 5 different areas, our Neighborhood Partners Program, which I'll explain in a moment, Bigs in Blue, an update in our front porch lineup system, Tip-A-Cop, and the poverty simulation that we conducted participated in not too long ago. On the Neighborhood Partners, this is a continuing segment or chapter in how we grow a police officer. That first part that we have going on Thursday, the Community Immersion Program, and I hope all of you received your invitations for that this Thursday. That's how we get into our cadets, our future police officers, learning about different parts of our city, different parts of our community. This is the next step in that. As an officer graduates from the academy and they go into the field training section where they're riding around with their senior officer and doing their gradings, the next step in their career is where you receive what's called your solo assignment. It's where an officer is assigned their final place where they get to be a police officer on their own. And once they receive those, we've identified longstanding neighborhood partners in our community that are willing to sit down with those future police officers before they ever work their first day on their own and hear from those community members who have lived and worked and raised families for years in those areas to hear what it's like to live there. But more importantly, what has it been like to be policed there? What is their perception? What have their interactions been with their police department? And they have these very frank and casual and informal conversations with those soon-to-be new solo police officers so they can start to understand that perspective. This is one of our own mechanisms that we work towards using to address implicit bias. We all have those. Well, if the only perspective, the only growth that a new officer has in understanding what it's like to be a police officer in a part of the city is from other police officers, then you're getting some of their implicit bias as well. The Neighborhood Partner Program, we work to use that to where that perspective and that perception broadens. So they're not only getting that perspective from their fellow police officers, they're getting it from the folks that live and work and play there. So we instituted that this first time, had great feedback from it, positive responses from both the police officers and the community members that participated, and we look to continue doing this on all future academies. Continuing our Big Brothers Big Sisters Bigs in Blue program, we have officers that have littles in the 4 schools that you see listed up there. I have one at my alma mater, which is Bestie Shepherd. Chief McCullough in the back of the room. Where's yours? Tyner. So we have little brothers at both of those, and we're working to expand that program as we go through the year. That's how I spend my Wednesdays. I reflected the other day, somebody asked me how it was going, and I was sitting in the hallway with my little brother Antonio, and we're playing just a game talking about life, and I realized that he had somehow convinced me to play the game Headbands. Y'all ever played this? Okay, so you put a band around your head and you put a card on it with some kind of thing on it, and you ask questions and you try and guess what card is on this thing that you can't see. And it dawned on me that I'm sitting in a full police uniform in the elementary school hallway with a headband on with a card on my head, and I thought, this is the greatest and most unconventional day I've had in law enforcement in my career. Never thought I would be doing that, but I love the interaction with Antonio on Wednesdays, and so we're hoping to continue to increase participation in that within the police department as we continue down the road. We've continued with our Front Porch Lineup program. We've held them at, again, numerous residences and businesses. The largest one that we did here recently is we partnered with Unum for a second evolution of this, and they gave us another 250 sports balls or Frisbees that have the Unum logo and the police department's logo on them, and the police officers ride around with these in their cars and their trunks. And they use it, it's the icebreaker. The officers see a group of kids, they can get out, they give them the balls freely, and if the interaction lasts 30 seconds or 10 minutes, either way, it's where we're not having to act in a traditional law enforcement role with our community's youth and just work to continue to build that trust and rapport that we need with those young men and women in our community. So we absolutely thank Unum for that partnership, and we look forward to more in the future with them. We participated in the Tip-A-Cop, which is where our officers basically work as servers in a restaurant, and a certain percentage of those proceeds from that day go into the Special Olympics Chattanooga Fund to help fund the actual events and the athletes that go on that day. So the next Tip-A-Cop is scheduled for January 23rd at Chewy's on Gun Barrel Road. A second event that we have that supports Special Olympics is we do the Polar Plunge. This year will be February 9th at Ross's Landing. We participated in that last year. If I could get the video to play. I don't know if I can do that from here or not. Any help? Okay, if you could see that, it is a fantastic video of your chief of police participating in the Polar Plunge last year in full uniform. Just representing the police department in the city, had an absolutely great time. It was cold, but I will be back out there again on February 9th, so I challenge everyone in the room, except council, I would never challenge you all, to join me at the Polar Plunge, and I'm going to try and shame a group of my officers to come with me on that day as well. And then we participated in the poverty simulation, which was a partnership with Southern Adventist University, where our cadets and many of our officers participated in understanding what it's like to not have what you need or what you believe you need. Simple questions. How do I feed my family? How do I make rent? How do I get gas? What happens if my car breaks down? The things that many of us consider an inconvenience can for many individuals in our community be life-changing. So we felt that it was very important, especially again, when we go into implicit bias training within our department, to help our cadets understand that at the onset of their law enforcement careers. And honestly, some of the greatest feedback we had was from our veteran officers. They received a tremendous amount of value and growth from participating in this program. We expect to participate in it again in the future. And as a result of this, and we're going to try and work on this, so this isn't, I don't necessarily can say I make a promise, but it is a goal that in one of our future community immersion program evolutions in an academy, that one of the diverse segments of Chattanooga that our cadets learn and interact with and study with is our homeless community. where we've typically done African American, Hispanic, Latino. This is another part of our community that we need to make sure that we understand perspectives and perceptions from. So we're going to work to figure that out. There may be some logistics on the front end, but we're hopeful that we can work through those. Second pillar, intelligence-led policing. One of the first things that we've worked on is we formed a new auto crimes unit. I'm sure you've seen in recent weeks our push to understand just the growth of thefts from motor vehicles. Lock your doors, hide it, lock it, take it. This is where we started to understand when we really started to dig into these crimes of individuals that simply check for unlocked doors to take the iPad off the front seat or the phone out of the cup holder. They were also resulting in an inordinate amount of thefts of vehicles with the keys in them or the key fobs in the cup holders. So people would just drive off. I mean, I think in one morning, in a 24-hour period, we had 5 cars stolen with the keys in them in one day. But when we started to actually look at the individuals that perpetrating these crimes, they connected over to a lot of our motor vehicle thefts. So we actually moved our auto theft unit and our auto crimes, our auto theft unit of people stealing items from in a car, we moved those into one unit so they can kind of correlate that intelligence, a lot of our efforts, so we're not duplicating efforts or missing things, and hopefully we can work to bring the numbers down in both of those areas. Our gun team saw a very productive year just in its correlation rate. Our responsiveness to shot fires, community members making these calls, we've had more shots fired coming in because of our responsiveness. The one thing that I do want to brag on our agency is the ATF recently formed a governing committee. It's the National Gun Crime Innovation Committee. And as a result of the initiatives and the work that you've seen from our department in NIBIN technology and our gun team and firearms evidence work, I was asked to be a member of that committee. As a result of that, through those interactions, and in speaking with the Deputy Director of the ATF, they took one of our major components of how we work to address responsively gun-based crime within our community and made it a part of the nation's best practice model that was presented to the International Association of Chiefs of Police in October. The part that they included was how we as an agency respond to shots fired calls. Typically in the past, when we've had a shots fired call, and I did this myself as a district guard, you'd get the call, you'd respond to it, you wouldn't hear anything, because obviously what happens? The shots are already over with. We would get in the area, advise dispatch we didn't locate anything, and we would get back in service. But the individuals that called the shots fired call, did that really present a police department that gave a crud about what just happened? We drove through the area and we drove off, didn't we? Our shots fired call response, what it looks like now is your officers will get out of the car. They walk around and look for shell casings. They look for firearms evidence that we can process to use in link analysis that is helping us solve the shooting that happens the next week, the house that gets shot up 2 days later, the homicide that may occur a month later, or the next night. Studies show that after one single firearm is involved in a shooting incident, it is 50% more likely to be involved in a third within 60 days. So it's track the gun evidence. But also what it communicates to the community is the officers not only get out and look for shell casings, they do one very important next step. They knock on doors. They ask the community members, did you hear shots? Can you tell us anything? Even if they don't want to speak to us, even if they heard them and they're not comfortable telling us, at least we got out of our cars and we showed them that we cared enough to get out of our cars. So that basis has been presented to police chiefs from across the country on a component of a gun crime initiative within their agencies to show responsiveness from its law enforcement agency, and it's been incorporated in that best practices model and presented. So we're extremely proud of the fact that Chattanooga's work in that area was acknowledged by our peers. One slide, homicide comparison. 2017, 2018, we are 37.5% down on homicides compared to last year. Because I don't want to jinx us, I'm going to say nothing else about this slide. I'm going to move through it as quickly as possible. We could circle back with questions if you had those. And the homicide clearance rate, I know we've spoken about this before, but I wanted to let the council know our percentages stayed consistent. For 2018, our clearance rate is 83% on our homicides from our investigators. Last year, it ended the year with 70. Year before that was 40. The national average is 60, and we were at 83%. If you'll notice on the slide, it is a combination of everything that your department and this community is doing together to address violence in our community. It's technology-based, it's NIBIN-based, it's community policing, it's building trust, it's getting out of the cars. It's collaborative impact models, not only between us, but between social services, community groups, schools. It's all of that. Your police department didn't create that. We just capture it. It's all of us creating that. So just want to let you know what we had talked about the last time I came up here has stayed consistent. And the final pillar, the Focused Deterrence Initiative. On the DUI arrests, just want everybody to know, looking at the numbers, the DUI fatalities, while our alcohol-related fatalities have gone down since 2016, we wanted to make sure that stayed consistent. If you look at the increase in DUI arrests that we have made as an agency in 2018, and that only captures through the end of November, is 758 compared to 619 to the year before. A lot of that was the use of state-sponsored grant funding for specific impaired driver enforcement. But also want to take the opportunity to recognize specifically 5 of our officers at CPD had 25 or more DUI arrests, and we had one officer assigned into our DUI unit, Officer Buckner. At the end of 2018, he had 226 DUI arrests, one person. So if anybody ever asks if one person can make a difference, Officer Buckner just did. That's 226 people that either made it home safely that could have been harmed or perished as a result, or could have harmed or killed someone else. That's huge. So I absolutely praise Officer Buckner and his efforts. And then crime prevention and security assessments. This is something we did last year. We're going to have another continuation of that on the 9th, where the police department, we pay for a crime prevention through environmental design course brought to us by the Law Enforcement Innovation Center out of University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And their outside professional instructors will come in, and it's free to anyone that wants to go, to help homeowners, business owners, managers, anyone that has a piece of property that they are responsible for, to understand how environmental design can help you deal with any potential issues you may be encountering, whether it's theft, vandalism, burglary, fear in any of its appearances. This CEPTED course can help you work through that just through environmental design. It's sponsored by the police department, and it's free. And these are just a few photographs. The one on the left is from National Night Out, and the one on the right was a partnership that we entered to close to Christmas with Academy Sports, where they supplied us with, I think it was 150 bicycles. 150 bicycles that we gave out to kids with perfect attendance records at local schools just before the holidays. So that was a really cool day for us. Any questions?
A couple. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, sir.
I have a couple questions, if you would help me. Would you walk me through, what does clearance mean?
It means that we have made an arrest or issued warrants.
Made an arrest?
We have confirmed to the level of probable cause who the suspect was for that crime.
Okay,
Or it has been exceptionally cleared by being ruled as justified.
thank you. My next question is regarding DUIs over the holidays. You know, we're thinking about New Year's Eve, and the question popped into my head with the ride-sharing programs. They're in place, Uber and whatnot. Do you have any data that shows any kind of reduction in DUIs with these platforms now available?
I do not, but I can absolutely get that for you, sir.
Okay, I'd love to see if it's making an impact, hopefully good.
From the hip, I would say yes, I believe so, and yes, I would hope so, but I would love to see the evidence. We
Me
will work
too.
on that.
Yeah.
Yes,
great.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, you got it. Thank you. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, sir. Chief, thank you. Good report. One of the most stressful times with interaction for a police officer may be at a traffic stop. Do we have any programs in place where we go into the schools or into our rec centers and instruct teenage drivers how to interact with a police officer during a traffic stop?
That was part of the discussion that we had last year where we talked about working on making public safety announcement or videos. We are still in the middle of working to find the actual film companies that can help us produce those professionally. I fortunately was part of a Governor's Highway Safety grant that I wrote several years ago. We made our own PSAs here relative to speeding, distracted driving, and DUI. They were great for a year. And then within a year, something became either antiquated or it changed. I moved on, the relevancy of the message changed. So making one that is produced by yourself, you have a very short shelf life for the applicability of what that video looks like. That's why we're working to hire an actual professional video company to help us shoot something that we can keep relevant, but also has some evidence behind what that format looks like. So we have continued those conversations. We're just working to find the actual vendor, and then we will begin crafting and then disseminating what those videos look like.
Well, as far as interacting with a police officer, though, that should be kind of I wouldn't think that would be ever come out of date, how to interact with a police officer, how to.
Our tactics change what those are. And I can bring you,
I'm sorry?
our tactics may change some of the
oh,
messages that we put.
okay.
And I'll bring up just one standing here with you. When I first started my career, we didn't do what are called passenger side approaches. We were never taught that. We were never shown to walk up on the passenger side of a vehicle as opposed to the driver's side of the vehicle. Hence why I've been hit by 4 cars in my career, because I approached passenger side and I left myself exposed to a line of traffic. So our tactics, the way we do things may change, so we want to make sure that we keep the relevancy of those messages consistent, absent those types of things.
So
And that's where we
are-
think a
so
professional
we're-
would be better.
If I hear you right, we're working on creating a video that could stay relevant and be able to interact then with teenage drivers to how to work through a traffic stop. if they
Yes, sir.
do get
Absolutely.
stopped. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good, sir. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I just want to say thank you for all the great things that the police department is doing within the community to build those relationships. I see that you guys are going above and beyond to make sure that the community trusts the police. And it's been great working with the police, actually, within my district. But I do have a couple of questions. My first question is that the recruitment of minorities, in particular to African American, how is that coming along?
The academy before last, as I've presented and spoke to several times, we actually hit a benchmark for our department. We had more minority cadets in that academy than we did white males. And that's the first time that's been achieved in the history of our department. We're still working through direct recruitment mechanisms. I will tell you this. Our minority applicants that come into the final screening stages, it looks like those numbers have moved down a little bit, and we're asking the question why. But our direct recruitment efforts, whether it goes through Each One Reach One, whether it's through our call log system of individuals that have dropped voluntarily, asking those questions of why, those have all continued, and those continue to show great results. So we have another academy starting in March, but I tried to get the numbers for you before I came here today, and I wasn't able to get those. I apologize. But I can send those over to council as soon as I get those.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. But I
Yes,
do
ma'am.
have, I already spoke to you about my daughter. She's actually interested in becoming a police officer. So I'm most definitely going to support her journey
Doing a small dance in my head right now, ma'am.
through that process, and I'm dancing too. And then my second question is about the police oversight board.
The Administrative Review
overview
Committee.
board. So how does that work, and how do community members apply to be a part of it?
I can go through the entire process or just start at the beginning, or I'm going to give it abbreviated. As a complaint starts, so I don't have to, and the council's heard me make the explanation before. When an allegation of officer misconduct occurs, whether that is generated administratively through inside the department or whether it comes from an external complaint from a community member, that begins an investigation, whether it is conducted by the chain of command or internal affairs, based on the severity of the allegation that has been stated. As it moves through the investigation and then different levels of review within those chains to make sure that the right folks, all the folks have been spoken to, it's comprehensive, it's complete, no one has missed everything. And then it gets, as you move through, lieutenant, captain, and assistant chief review with recommendations on what their findings were. The next stage on that is it goes to what we refer to as the Administrative Review Committee. That is a committee that is comprised of sworn members of different ranks and members of our community. And they meet once a month, and they review every single reviewed, investigated allegation of officer misconduct. If there's body-worn camera footage, they see it. If there's in-car camera footage, they see it. The interviews, they read the entire report. They have access to every single piece of the investigation to the same level that I do. Then that committee votes on whether they agree or what they believe the final disposition of that allegation should be. Whether it's sustained, not sustained, unfounded, or exonerated. Those are the only 4 ways that those can be closed. They make that vote as a committee. If any member of that committee dissents from that consensus, they have the ability to make a written statement at that point stating why they do not agree with the vote of the committee, and that dissenting opinion is then made a permanent part of the file on the investigation of that incident. All of that then progresses up to the chief of staff. He makes his review and recommendation, and then the chief of staff forwards on to me, or I review it and I make the determination of whether I believe there's enough there to possibly sustain. And then I schedule a disciplinary review hearing where everyone comes together, we work through the hearing, and then a final disposition is reached. Relative to the structure of that committee, it is chaired by one of our assistant chiefs just to run the processing, but he is that chair position is a non-voting member unless there's a tie by our policy. Then it is equally divided between sworn members of the department at various ranks, moving from officer, sergeant to lieutenant. And then you have members of the community that have been appointed to that committee over time. And I absolutely encourage and would love to see more members of the community on that. They're welcome. And what I ask is, if anybody does have an interest in becoming part of that committee, you can either reach out to me directly at the police department, and obviously some people may not be comfortable with that. If they would like to use counsel as a conduit for that communication, that is up to you if you would like to do that. However, that is solicited and reaches us so we can work through the details of appointment, I absolutely welcome that.
And I know I said 2 questions, but one, just to follow up. So is there a certain criteria to be on the committee? Or is it just anybody from the community can be recommended to be on it?
It's generally any member. Now, there are some agreements that person will have to sign. One in particular is a confidentiality agreement, which means you cannot discuss that internal affairs case outside of the committee meeting. The reason being is, one, it has not reached a final disposition, so it's not releasable information, but also oftentimes, and unfortunately, some of our internal investigations may also cross over into an open and ongoing criminal investigation. So if information is discussed outside of there, you could compromise the criminal prosecution and investigation of an individual, which has greater repercussions. And I'm talking about one of my officers. But if they're to be held accountable in a criminal court, I do not want that jeopardized because we made a mistake in an administrative setting. Does that make sense?
Right. That does make sense. It's important. I asked that question because it's important to me to have a diverse group of people
Yes, ma'am.
on the committee, and not just people that's just pro-police.
I have a
And-
longstanding member of our local NAACP chapter who is on that committee. That's just one of them.
Right.
But I welcome as many people as we can that can work on the committee, understand the functions of the committee, are willing to sign the confidentiality, and we work through appointment.
Okay. We'll be sending some people your way. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, she kind of took my question. But that's one of the things I was wanting to address is that, just moving into the new year, I definitely will send people your way, especially some of our younger constituents, because, you hear such a rumble in the communities of that oversight committee or people who has that distrust. And when you look at all the amazing things that you are doing, I salute you. And then it's just one infraction or one thing that can happen that can, in some sense, cause a lot of shame and say, hey, I can't believe this is going on. But that's not a reflection of the entire police department.
Trust is
And-
fragile, sir.
Yes. And so that's one of the things, I guess, just to echo what Councilwoman Coonrod said, is that, a lot of the younger people are asking us, how can they get on that committee? And if they do become a part of the committee, do you all accept suggestions to say that, hey, maybe this is not probably working or this is not being addressed? Is there an open door policy to where they can come talk to you or a person that's in charge to say, hey, maybe we can readjust to do things differently?
To sum that up, our policy is a living, breathing entity.
Yes.
It is reviewed constantly. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you start on one end, by the time you finish, you got to start on the other end again. But that's how our policy works. And some of those changes and revisions that I've seen in my career have directly come from instances that generated through an internal investigation.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
How you doing, sir?
Good, sir. You?
I noticed you said that you had a lot of minorities in the police force late in the recruiting. I'm correct?
Yes, sir.
How many African Americans are that minority? For one, I know you don't know that now, but when you get the report to Ms. Councilman Coonrod, get that to me also.
Yes, sir.
And then how many in the last 2 years have African Americans left the department on percentage-wise?
I asked for an attrition report not too long ago. I'm just having some difficulty getting that pulled because I'm interested in that component as well, but I also have to study what our attrition looks like, what our retirement and non-retirement attrition looks like, how well are we retaining the officers we have. We also instituted the recoup cadet contract, for lack of a better term, that we put forward last year, where when cadets start the academy, they sign and agree that if they leave our agency within 2 years of being hired to take a law enforcement job in another agency, they owe us $15,000, because that's about what it costs to train them time-wise. I'm interested to see how effective has that been. So I want to do a more in-depth attrition study of the department as a whole, and that is a very critical component of it, sir.
You know about when you probably have that finished?
Soon as possible. And I know
Another
that's a
month
very
from
big, I sent the email, I haven't had a response yet on what that's gonna look like, but I will let you know as soon as I know a timeline. And if what I let you know is not acceptable, we'll talk.
All right.
Fair
thanks.
enough? Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilman Byrd, you have another question?
Real quick, can I get an email copy of this report?
Send this presentation
The
around?
PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, see no further lights. Chief, thank you very much. We appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, we are done with our regular agenda session, and we will adjourn into Public Works and Transportation Committee. Chairman Mitchell?
Can I get approval of minutes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We're going to start with transportation today. Mr. Bailey, how you doing?
I'm well, Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
We have an ordinance on final reading, 5B today. Does anybody have any questions or would like to discuss that? See no lights. All right. So then we'll move to ordinances on first reading today. Would you please read 6C?
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the 100 block of Knoll Street detailed on the attached map to resolve a legacy encroachment subject to certain conditions.
I see no lights, but that's a District 2. Mr. Bailey, I think I know what's going on there, but could you explain that, just so, make sure?
Excuse me, Mr. Councilman, I was more prepared for the others. Let me pull this one up and. This is a request for a partial abandonment, and we didn't see a future use because it's very, very steep and not potentially usable. The owners subject to the retention of full width easements. We didn't see a reason to object to this, and it was recommended for approval by Planning Commission.
Okay. That's good enough for me. And it is very steep over there. Moving on to resolutions for today, please read 7J.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to enter into an agreement with NAPCO Electric Company, Inc. relative to contract number T15027201 for construction services associated with Chattanooga Regional ITS Phase 1A CCTV cameras in the CBD in the amount of $921,486 with a contingency amount of $92,148.60 for a total amount of $1,013,634.60.
Councilman Oglesby.
Yeah, Mr. Bailey, could you give me a little background on this, please?
I'd be happy to. This is a
Thank
project
you.
that we're really excited about. This is the newest and best form of technology for sensing traffic at traffic signals that enables our signals to be better maintained, better timed, work better for traffic. They also have some other smart city types of assets that they're equipped with, such as the ability to count automatically vehicles that are going through the intersections. And the reason that we were able to do this project is because we saved money on a grant that we were awarded many years ago to do the initial deployment of our ITS, Intelligent Transportation System, in the downtown. So this is a downtown, this is focused in the downtown. I think somebody asked me for that. It basically is the CBD, inclusive of also the intersection at Macaulay and Bailey. And the reason that we have one signal that's so far out from the CBD is because it will enable us to be able to track traffic that's coming and going from the tunnel, which is significant at that location.
Okay, when will the installation or the implementation start?
We're expecting it to be finished by August.
Okay. So it has already been started, the installation and all that has already
We
started?
wouldn't start until you authorized us to sign this contract, and
Okay.
this is the company that's going to do the installation for us.
And that should say this is voted upon, what, like 10 days, 2 weeks or something? Would
I
it
think
start
there's a standard.
after?
It's a 2-week, once it's approved, in 2 weeks, we can activate it.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Blythe, do we have any plans to take this kind of technology to, I don't know, other places in the city? Say Gun Barrel Road at Christmas time?
Not concrete plans, but we have put this technology in that part of the city, your district. In fact, I think one of the first cameras that was used in this way was put in as a test case at the intersection of Shallowford Road and Lifestyle Way, which I know is quite pressured during the holidays.
Correct.
So we'd like to deploy this system citywide.
So Shalford Road coming next, is that what I just heard you say?
You heard me say that this is good technology that makes our city work better, and we want to use it everywhere.
Great, Shalford Road's next. Thank you. Thank you, Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I've had a couple of folks say that they're having a little trouble understanding the clerk. Adrian, is the volume down, or can we turn that up a little bit? You want to? Tell you what, let's do. Let's go to next week, and would you please read? It says transportation. It says F.
An ordinance closing and abandoning an unopened alley in the 1000 block of Beeson Drive to allow for private development as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
Okay, I see there's actually two of these. Let's deal with the first one first. I see it's recommended by approval by transportation. Would you explain what's going on here, Mr. Bailey?
Yes, sir, and I'll do my best here. You all have the city has a policy that's adopted for how we review requests for right-of-way abandonment, and I'm going to talk about these together because there's a difference between one of them, which is recommended for approval, and one of them that is not recommended for approval. It's a two-tiered, y'all have heard me say this before, the applicant has to show that there's a significant private or public interest. The applicant has to show that there's a significant private or public interest, and they also have to show that there's no future need. The way that we interpret that is that we're not obligated to determine what that future need is, but the applicant has to show that there's not a future need. So in the first one, and incidentally, the process is that the full interdisciplinary staff that reviews planning commission cases gives their recommendation first. So the recommendation for denial came from the staff to the planning commission, and the planning commission did not take that recommendation and voted for approval. Part of both of these cases was wound up in the PUD. The PUD represented the significant private interest. If there was not a PUD, there would not be a need for this right-of-way abandonment. So we withheld our recommendation until we knew that the PUD had been approved, which I believe it has now. So the significant interest part is satisfied. For the first one, the future use part is satisfied as well because this right-of-way which is essentially the same location as the entrance to the proposed neighborhood, is being replaced by a public right-of-way. So there's an abandonment, but it's being replaced with a public right-of-way. The other one, we felt like could provide secondary access, either in the form of a pedestrian connection or a street, but was being abandoned instead, really for no reason other than to add real estate to the development. And we, as a general rule, don't think that's a significant interest and not one that we approve. So we did struggle with this one because there's topographic challenges. This is the recommendation that started with the full staff, and it's still transportation's recommendation. Let me back up because I may have caused some confusion. Our recommendation is for approval for the first one. It's for denial for the second one. And the second one is because we believe that that right-of-way has a future use as a secondary connector for the neighborhood.
Okay, now the second one you're speaking of is G, which we have not read yet, so
Yes.
could you please read G?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the unopened 1,000 block of James Avenue as detailed on the attached map.
Councilman Henderson.
Thanks, sir. Blythe, this whole PUD was a very laborious process, and to get to this place now and sort of say we're going to recommend denial of this one right-of-way that obviously the development sort of hinges on. It looks like to me the right-of-way, does it just go and stop basically at, I've got a little map here. I noticed we didn't have a overhead, I don't guess, but
We do, if you want to pull up.
yeah, go ahead and pull that up.
I've got a presentation under the team drive. I think you have the same.
I want to make sure that my information's correct with yours.
The one that we're recommending denial of is the one that's shaped like a fish hook.
Yeah.
In plan.
Now, it looks like to me it just goes, I guess, kind of to a property line to the west and just stops or dead
Right.
ends. So, explain sort of how the rest of this property would be served with a cul-de-sac
Right.
where all the lots would touch. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding the future
Yeah.
need of
And I understand the site plan has
keeping
been,
this, I guess.
the site plan has been worked on as a result of some of the work that the
I'm sorry, I
community-
can't-
The site plan has been worked on. I'm not sure that I have the latest site plan.
Okay.
But on the site plan that we have, it showed a secondary, I think pedestrian connection on the full western boundary of, this is not going to show that, but it will show just to clarify, it's this right-of-way. So the development, the site plan that we saw showed a T-shaped road configuration that dead-ended in a cul-de-sac on the bottom of the plan, roughly in the middle of that curve. And then at the very end, they showed a pedestrian connector down to Beeson Drive. The part that we felt like did not meet the city's policy was that this curve follows the contours of the hill, and we felt like would provide a better connection if one was going to be provided as a secondary connector to Beeson Drive. So that's why we felt like it wasn't clear to us that there wasn't a future use for this right-of-way.
So would it be possible, this has 2 readings during our first reading, if we maybe placed a condition on it that the engineers would sit down with transportation and see what kind of agreement could be worked?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, and I think
No, this is something we will not hear until next week.
Right,
This is
yeah,
following
I
week.
said that first reading.
Okay.
I'd be happy to chat with Donna after the meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I will point out to the council that this AD engineering document was circulated beforehand, and so before next week, if you want to take a look at that, please feel free to do so. I believe we've got one more, don't we, H, for transportation?
An ordinance closing and abandoning multiple right-of-ways in the 1900 block of Roanoke Avenue, formerly known as Harriet Tubman Homes, to facilitate future development as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
Councilman Byrd?
Thank you, Chair. Blythe, could you give me an overview and
of what's going on here?
These are, we're talking about, I'm sorry, this is item H, correct?
Say again?
This is item H, this is the Roanoke Avenue.
Yes, sir.
Okay, these are multiple rights-of-way within the Harriet Tubman site, which are no longer needed due to the potential for development that might create jobs there. And we also felt like there was a potential that rights-of-way and connectivity could be provided with the site plan that's developed when such time that we have somebody for that site. This was recommended for approval initially by staff and then again by Planning Commission.
And could you explain to us what the certain conditions will be?
There are not conditions, we don't typically put conditions on rights-of-way abandonment, Councilman.
It says on here, subject to certain conditions, that's why.
I think-
Detailed on the attached maps, subject to certain conditions.
I think that's standard language. Maybe we should look at correcting that.
Hey,
Mr.
yes,
Councilman.
sir. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
so much. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you, Blake.
You good?
I'm good.
Councilman Gilbert?
Hey, Black, just one quick question on this H. If we do, say we didn't vote for that, will you still do the same thing on these roads? If we don't vote for the M1, would you still do the same thing for these roads right here? Abandon them?
I'd have to consult with our staff on how we reviewed that. That's a good question. I'm not comfortable answering that question without
Can you get back
consulting-
with us?
Yes, I certainly can.
Appreciate it.
Blythe, do you by any chance have a slide of this also?
I'm sorry. Yes, sir. You can see that it's landlocked on the west, and the rights-of-way currently connect into Roanoke and Southern, which we would assume that with a future development would also have connectivity to both of those streets.
All right, seeing no more lights, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to Public Works. Did that bad old Justin Hollins send you up here to us again for a committee meeting?
I'm here.
He gets scarce. He gets really scarce around
I'm here.
committee meetings. Good to see you.
You too. Mr.
All right,
Chair.
we're going to start with ordinances on first reading. For this week, I believe it is 6A.
An ordinance closing and abandoning a sewer easement located at Rosedale Drive in the 5900 block of Hancock Road as detailed on the attached map.
Councilman Gilbert.
Just curious, why are we abandoning this?
We have no use for it. Yeah, we don't have any use for it.
That's no use for it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
All right. Please read B.
An ordinance closing and abandoning a sewer easement located in the 1500 block of Long Street as detailed on the attached map.
All right. Just no use for it?
No use for it, sir.
All right. You're lightening up. Okay, we're going to move on to resolutions. Please read 7D.
A resolution authorizing the award of contract number W17004201 to Reeves Young LLC of Sugar Hill, Georgia, for Chattanooga Wet Weather Combined Sewer Storage Phase 1, a consent decree project in the amount of $46,569,100 with a contingency amount of $2 million for an amount not to exceed $48,569,100, subject to SRF loan approval.
Councilman Henderson.
What's the timeline for getting started and completion?
I'll have Mr. Malone come up and let us know.
Wow. Yeah, good question, Councilman.
We have to talk to purchasing real quick on some information to be able to answer that. So if we can come back to this item, we'll have an answer in a moment.
Okay,
Have an answer when?
in a moment.
In a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's move on then. I don't see any other lights. for now. Please read E.
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 2 final for CDM Smith, Inc., relative to contract number W12024-101, sewer rehabilitation for Chattanooga Creek 4 subbasin, a consent decree project, for an increased amount of $11,663.59, for a revised contract amount not to exceed $702,904.59.
All right. F, please.
A resolution authorizing the award of contract number R16015201 and R17002201 to Clenco of Chattanooga, Tennessee, paving at Irwin Riverfront Marina parking lot and Parks Maintenance Building in the amount of $182,199.30 with a contingency amount of $8,000 for an amount not to exceed $190,199.30.
Councilman Oglesby.
Yeah, would like some details on item F.
Okay. Basically, we have the same contractor that's going to go out and pave both of these locations, the parking lot down by the marina and our parks headquarters, which is located on Middle Street, right off of Broad Street. So it's probably economies of scale, basically getting asphalt and everything, so running it at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, Mr. Stone, is that the little parking lot where they sell the boats? Is that where that is, on the Irwin?
That is a good question. I believe it's the one right next to the marina, there at the dock there.
It's paved already, correct? Is it being repaved or is it gravel?
No, this should be a paving, a new pavement. Dennis? I think Dennis is in the middle or something.
You can get back to me.
Yeah, I'll
Thank you,
get
Chairman.
back to you on that.
Well, I can see why Mr. Holland doesn't want to come to this meeting. Okay.
He's on vacation with his family right now.
Well, good for him. Good for him. All right, I believe we're moving on to G with 2 questions still pending.
A resolution to approve the administrator for the Department of Public Works to accept a donation from the Park Central Neighborhood Association of about 44 trees with an approximate value of $4,500 to be planted along the city right-of-way in the 900 block, 1,000 and 1,100 blocks of Main Street from Central Avenue to South Holtzclaw.
Can I ask a question? Do you mind? Where is the Park Central Neighborhood Association located? The Park Central Neighborhood Association located?
I don't know. I think that's new to a lot of us.
Ms. Williams, I believe, can answer that. Can she?
Okay.
Jackpot.
Actually, Jay Martin is here. He can give you a more accurate explanation of the boundaries of the neighborhood association, but it's a newly formed neighborhood association that's in Councilman Byrd's district. And they're starting off with a bang by giving the city $4,500. So not required, but
I was
appreciated.
wondering because I'd never heard of them, so it's new.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. So Park Central, we started in 2017. Northern boundary is the cemetery. To the west is Central Avenue, east is Holtzclaw, south is 23rd Street. So it's predominantly businesses right now. And we've raised some money and decided to implement that with trees along the Main Street corridor.
Thank you
Absolutely.
very much. Okay, we're moving on to H.
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 1 final for JDH Company, Inc. of Chattanooga, Tennessee, relative to contract number Y17016-201, replacement roofing system for Eastdale YFD Center Building, for a decreased amount of $5,300 to release a contingency amount of $14,000 for a revised contract amount of $133,925.
Okay down there? Okay. What, are you trying to negotiate some of them away from him? Okay, I like it. All right, please read aye. Running out of time to get those answers, by the way.
I have one already.
All right.
That is the gravel lot that'll be paved
Oh.
at the marina. All right, thank you.
Okay, good job. Aye, please.
A resolution authorizing a 2 of a 4-year term for on-call blanket contracts for professional surveying services, contract number E17002901, with the following firms: Arcadis US Inc., ASA Engineers and Consultants Inc., Civic Engineering and Information Technologies Inc., Earthworks LLC, the RLS Group Inc., SNME Inc., and Vaughn and Melton Consulting Engineering Inc. in the amount of $300,000.
I see no lights. Any word from purchasing yet?
Actually, while we were in this meeting, there was some additional information submitted to purchasing that just had come to our attention, so we need to withdraw that item, so we've got some time to evaluate it with purchasing, so it's going to take more time than we have. So
That's on tonight's agenda, so we would have to pass it, I believe, wouldn't we? Or defer it versus taking it off the agenda?
Yeah. How much? We'll request a deferral. How much time do we need for a deferral?
2 weeks?
Hey, don't put pressure on them like that.
I'll go ahead and say 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
We can defer it another 2 weeks if it's not, if we're not ready at that time.
We should be ready by that time.
Okay.
It won't take,
In 2 weeks.
take us a day or two to come to the bottom of what this issue arose, and we will get back to it.
So,
Just one. If we can do 1 week, that would be preferable. That'll put us on the least amount of delay, if we can do one.
I'm gonna recommend this.
are you?
Yeah.
Well, all right.
My district.
Okay.
Do what I want to.
All right. I like it. I think that's it unless someone, oh, wait a minute. Councilperson Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a question, a clarity. If you don't mind me asking, what's your position under Justin?
I'm the deputy administrator. Justin is the administrator.
So the deputy administration, well, why is it every time Justin is not available and you're sent in to present, why aren't you provided with all the information that we have to address the questions that we have, or why does it always have to be? It's nothing against you. I'm just wondering if they're providing you with the necessary information to present on the items that we have. And this is, it happened not just today, but I noticed that it's frequently. Do we need to pull Justin to the side to make sure that when he's absent, that you got the necessary information?
Well, I think that some of it is based on the questions related to the items that are on the list. We have a lot that comes through our office, especially our engineering division. So it's really based on the questions that are asked and the detail of the questions. So sometimes we don't want to just give an answer if we're not 100% sure.
Okay, well, that makes more sense to me. I just, from my perspective, being an African-American male in the position that you're in, I just want to make sure no one is setting you up for failure when you come in front of council. But thank you so much for what you have provided us with.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you, councilperson. Is that it? Any questions of anyone else? If not, we will go to Youth and Family Development Committee.
That's right. That's how we roll.
Move to approve.
I know, right? Can we get approval of the agenda?
Move to approve.
Thank you. So now we're here 2019 with the best
committee it is, Youth and Family Development. Thank you so much, Coach, for presenting to us today. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the council. Happy New Year to all of you. And it gives me great joy always to come and give you an update on some of the great things that's happening in youth and family development. And as we enter into this new year, we're just as excited and motivated to continue to identify the needs of the youth and families that we serve throughout the city of Chattanooga and carry out the assignment and our mission that is established by Mayor Burke: smarter students, stronger families, and we're excited to continue to push forward. Today, we have an update on our, well, I'll say December camp. We usually call it winter camp, but we hadn't had much of a winter. So our December camp, children are out of school, and one of the things that Mayor Burke charged us to do is to make our camps free of charge anytime the schools are not in, to give our youth somewhere to go, something to do, and to continue their learning and mentoring experience. And we've done that with great enthusiasm. Our staff and all of the programs that we provided during our camps have been very beneficial to our youth development as a whole, and we'll continue to move forward in that vein. Today, our Director of Recreation will come, Greta Hayes, and give you an update on how our December winter camp went, and the progress that was made, and the exciting activities our youth participated in. And then we'll entertain any concerns or questions you may have. Greta.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Council. Just want to say thank you before I get started again to each of you for your support, to Mayor Burke, to Mara and Tony, and to Coach Jennings for your leadership and giving us this opportunity to present programs and activities for our communities over this time when they're out of school. Let me get this. Is this working? Okay. Am I hitting 4? Okay. Still not. Trying to. Just go to the next one. Yeah. Okay. Just quickly going to go over our mission. I know you're familiar with this, but in case someone here isn't, it's the mission of the Recreation Division to provide diverse recreation and leisure opportunities for all ages and abilities in a safe, well-maintained environment. And that's some of the things that Coach just mentioned was the goal of Mayor Burke and Coach Jennings. Our goal is to build relationships, create partnerships, and facilitate programs that accommodate the overall interests and needs of our community. So over our winter break camp, the dates for the camp this year were December the 20th through January 4th. We were actually open to the public 8 days this year in comparison to last year where we had camp for 12 days. We had 16 YFD centers that actually held camps. This was for ages 6 to 13 years old, boys and girls, and our hours of operation when we are out of school for all of our YFD centers is 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. During this time, we hosted 2,238 participants over winter break. This includes those that were in camp and those that participated in other programs that we offered throughout the days. We also served lunch during this time with our lunch food program, and we served 1,966 meals. 4 of these days, meals were served at Chattanooga State while our youth participated and were special guests at Chattanooga State at the 2 basketball tournaments that they had, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. So some of the activities, I want to really compliment Kim Battle. She is our coordinator, program coordinator that oversees all of our summer camps, winter camps,
special events that we host throughout the year, and she's our liaison that works with other departments on special events. She has done an incredible job. She has these camps planned out 6 months in advance, every detail down to food, to transportation, to the activities that they'll be participating in, and she also coordinates additional staff. She coordinates any needs that the centers relate to her that they're going to need during those times, from board games to arts and crafts activities. I just want to commend her. She has done an absolutely fantastic job pulling these camps together. So some of the activities, we did ice skating on the landing, which is a really fun trip for a lot of our youth who never get the opportunity to ice skate. They go down and they're there for, I think, almost 3 hours in rotation, and our staff goes with them, and this is just a really fun time for them to get to experience something new. Our camps, we've really, our summer camps and our winter camps, we've tried to focus on exposure to things that our youth may not see on a daily basis. Getting them on college campuses, whether it's UTC or Chattanooga State, ice skating, the jump park out at Hamilton Place Mall. These are things that they typically may not do with their families, and this is an opportunity for them to be exposed to those activities, and they absolutely love it. Last year we went to UTC and did a men's and women's basketball game. But this year, the Times Free Press and Jay Price over at Chattanooga State started first annual Chattown Classic. So this was a basketball tournament they had prior to Christmas that included local high school teams, a lot of the kids that have been through our YFD programs that are now participating in high school sports. And we've created a great partnership with Chattanooga State and the Times Free Press in these events. Our kids are able to go to the games for free. They would get a name, sorry, not a name badge, but a wristband, and they get 2 pieces of pizza, chips, and a drink for free while they're at the games, and then they get to stay there, hang out, and be exposed to a college campus and watch kids that they recognize and that they look up to participate in these games. So they went to the Chattown Classic, and then the week after Christmas, they went to the big Best of Preps. And then we also do a partnership where we have camps with Jay for boys and girls through our summer camps. So this has been something that has been very positive, and we've had to actually have cutoff dates because we've got so many kids that want to participate with the limitations of their staff. In addition to these field trips, the centers have provided arts and crafts activities, had movies, did community meals, just did tons of things while they were at the center. Had John A. Patton, for instance, had carnival-style games. They had a Winter Wonderland Carnival. They had bingo, photo booths, face painting, Christmas movies. So those are the types of activities that were taking place at some of the centers. So flip back over here. In addition to this, we had a lot of practices going on. We are starting our youth basketball league. Actually, it starts Thursday night. We will be playing at Brainerd, Tyner, South Chattanooga, East Chattanooga, and those will be the locations that we'll be playing our games at. The sports basketball ages are ages 3 for our peewees, all the way up to 12 years of age. It is boys and girls, and right now we have 68 teams with over 1,000 participants for our youth basketball league, and we have 20 volunteer male coaches. So I think that is great that we're getting a lot of volunteers to come and give their time and give back to our youth. And again, I just want to say thank you to Coach, Mayor Burke, Mara, and Tony, and then you for your leadership and support and allowing us to present programs and camps like this for our youth while they're on break from school. So that's our brief presentation.
Thank you so much, Greta, for
You're
that
welcome.
presentation. So any questions? Any questions? No, just-
Hey, Ms. Greta, I know we've started, excuse me, meeting with John Cunningham from the school system. Are we able to start implementing any learning supplements to kind of help bolster what the school system is doing throughout the year either in our winter camps or our summer camps yet? I mean, have we been able to address any of those supplemental needs through our camps yet?
We didn't during this winter camp. However, we are still meeting with John and the committee that you came and met with us out of the Board of Education. We are working on a STEM program that will be spearheaded by Mark Thomas. Jason, if you want to come add anything. That will be spearheaded by Mark Thomas. It will be piloted at Avondale, at Carver, South Chattanooga, and Brainerd. That we will be working with the school system to start our STEM programming at those 4 locations.
During the summer?
Actually, we're going to try to do it year-round. Yeah, it's going to start year-round.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to wait and just try to do it in the summer, but we weren't prepared to start this winter because of ordering equipment and having things in place, but we will start that year-round.
Would you let us know when that starts occurring so that we can go out and sort of
Absolutely.
observe what's going on?
Sure.
All right.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you. Hello, Greta. Hey, Coach. Definitely awesome presentation. At Carver Center, I was there through the Christmas. We did a Christmas in District 8. And it's amazing how the kids just respond to attention, loving attention. Thomas that you have over there is an awesome guy. I had a conflict with one of the kids, and the way he handled the young man was so amazing. So I just salute you for having a great staff, and Thomas is an awesome guy. Just like at Avondale with Gerald Perry, they just have a knack with the kids in the community. I want to also congratulate you on the programs that's going on during the winter break and during the summer break. I mean, during winter and summer. Just to get kids out of their environment, you'll be amazed how it just open up their minds and get them to do other things. Just brilliant what you guys are doing. I also would like to see, and I don't know if this is always already implemented. We have places like HomeServe. We have places like M&M Industries that we've given pilots to. A lot of people say that these are not livable wage jobs, or you should be making $15, $17, $18, $20 an hour. But these jobs start off anywhere from $11 to $12 an hour. And kids that are not thinking of going to college or maybe not in that place, I see them right there in those centers. Every day I go by, so many young kids from the ages of 13 to 18. I would love to see some type of pipeline or some type of program to where these kids have access to these facilities or to these people that we have partnered with as a city to say, hey, come to these centers and work out some type of situation where when these kids are graduating, if they're not looking to go to school, like when you say you went to Chattanooga State, some kids don't know that it's a Chattanooga State over there because they don't leave out of their communities. And these are just small things that are helping our community, but they go unseen and unheard, and people kind of say, no one's doing the work. Obviously, the work is being done. So even with the question of bringing a job facility to the Harriet Tubman site, if just that entity or these things that are happening, that's who it's for. That's who a lot of these things that we're doing now, we're taking care of the kids of the future. And I think at these 2 centers that I frequent, I see that these kids, need a uplifting future in some way. They can say, hey, I do have a place to go. I do have a place to create some type of income. So I don't know if we have things like that in place, but I would love to see that happen.
We have a strategy we're rolling out going forward that we're working with HR.
Yes, sir.
And we will be focusing on bringing those career development workforce type of opportunities to the centers.
Yes, sir.
And targeting the neighborhoods and the people that live in those neighborhoods to give them great opportunities and access to what's available in the city of Chattanooga to create the opportunities for workforce opportunities.
Thank you. That's meeting them right where they're at, and I just know that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, the other thing too is with our recreation division, as you all know, many of our young people that's involved in sports think about trying to be professional athletes, and we know the percentages are very small for that to happen. But what we're in the process of doing is helping them identify and understand that there are jobs and career opportunities in the sports industry, but they behind the scene, and expose them to the opportunities in athletics to where if they don't make it in the professional sport, that they still can work in the industry in some way and earn a living. And we're in the process of, Greta, we've been talking about that for a while, and exposing career opportunities so they can see how they fit and what other training they would need to pursue it, just in case they don't make it in the professional sport that they
And I
are
like
interested in.
I like what you just said, how they fit, because one of the situations, like, people will play with emotion, and we want trade schools, we want STEM, things going on, but a lot of kids, sometimes when you sit down and talk to them, you have to meet them where they're at and get to know them. So when I go to Carver Center or I go to Avondale Center, a lot of those kids kind of don't have a direction, or don't have any guidance sometimes to which way they want to go. They're kind of just, they want to be the next Kyrie Irving, or, but to know that, hey, I can be the one that takes care of Kyrie Irving if he gets hurt, or, hey, I can be the one that works at this foundry or works at this facility and make money to help my mom to get us out of our situation. I mean, I think those are positive seeds that we can plant, and that's just doing something instead of doing nothing at all and letting our kids fall by the wayside. So thank you, Coach. Thank you, Greta.
Thank you. Also, coming up this year, Councilwoman Coonrod and I have been talking about the chess program, and Greta and I have been meeting and talking about that for about a year and a half. We feel like this would be the year that we really pursue and push chess clubs and pursue chess tournaments through our centers and get kids sitting down, thinking through real-life situations through the game of chess. And Councilwoman Coonrod have committed to help us spearhead that initiative and challenging people to sit down and play chess with Councilwoman Coonrod and teach the children how to play chess and start these chess clubs in our community. I think it's a great opportunity for us. Scholarships are given to chess clubs and students that play chess, and that's something some of our children haven't been exposed to. So that's outside of the box thinking that we're moving towards as well. Also, the last thing, the Howard Project with the work-based learning with HR collaboration, and the transitional school goes before Hamilton County Board of Education on January 17th for approval, and we'll be moving forward with that piece after that's approved on the 17th.
Thank you, Coach. We got a couple of more questions. Councilman Gilbert.
I just want to thank Youth and Family Development, Greta, and Coach for their ability to change the lives of kids. A lot of times we talk about what can we do when you're actually doing it at an early age, so that when you catch them at an early age, that kind of turns them around, keep them going to the negative side to a positive side. And I do appreciate that. And I think the program that you're developing between Howard and the city is a great program. It's a hands-on program that will actually train these kids and have opportunity for them to have employment. I really appreciate that. And dealing with that chess club, Sam Blakemore, he might be able to volunteer for you.
He's ready. I've already told him.
Yeah, all right, because he knows the ins and outs of it.
Yeah, we got some guys that we've been talking to for about a year. We were ready to roll it out. I think we got a good volunteer corps, and our staff, I think we're ready to go.
That's good. Again, I appreciate everything you're doing. Again, you are making a difference in our kids so that they can be successful. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Well, I gotta say most definitely to the best department that it is, YFD, that you guys touch so many lives at an early age, at the age of 6, and you actually become the parent to a lot of kids that, are latchkey kids. To those kids who are struggling to find identity within themselves, and also those kids who, that's their only meal is at that center. So you all touch them in a holistic way, which is very important. But just a few things that I wanted to say about the chess program is that it's very important. I'm an advocate for chess. Love to play chess, and anybody want to play me, I'll take you up on that offer. But it's a great way to get kids that especially come from the inner city, introduce them to learning how to think and to strategize. And you can use the game of chess and implement it in their everyday lives. When you think about the street corner hustlers, when you think about single-parent homes, you think about the workforce, and you can strategically guide the game of chess and provide everyday lessons on that chessboard for those group of kids and provide them with a way to begin to think for themselves, right? So that's what we need to introduce those kids to, and there's scholarships, man, that untapped scholarships that could most definitely benefit our children that live in the inner city community. And I'll share this. A lot of things that I do in the community, I don't publicize it, and it's for various reasons. Well, I have used the game of chess in my community, and particularly to people, individuals, and it's been targeted that way, that are selling drugs in my community on the corners in specific areas. And so I keep my chessboard in my car, in my other car, and once I see them located outside the stores, I pull up, we have a conversation, and I introduce them to the game of chess. If they can play, we're gonna play right then on the spot. So a young man, we started playing chess, and he's destroyed my community for many years on this same corner. And I challenged him to the game of chess and said, well, hey, if I beat you, the only thing that I'm asking of you is to not sell drugs on this corner any longer. He took me on that up on my offer, and we played. It was a great game. However, he did not beat me, so he had to adhere to no longer selling drugs on this corner. And, the first 2 days I passed by, I wouldn't see the young man there, and then finally I came up on him unexpectedly. I think he kind of got used to my routine. Well, I caught him, and he just so happened to be on this corner. So I get out the car. He immediately proceeds to pull up his pants, tuck his shirt in. Oh, hey, Miss Coonrod, how you doing? The individual that he was talking to, he whispered and told them to go head on, And we began to carry on the conversation about the chess game and the previous agreement. Well, what you got for me? I said, well, today is not chess, but I got a job opportunity for you. Okay, Miss Coonrod, what is it? Connected him to different avenues with Troy, got him through some programming, and now he's working at Volkswagen. So now when I pass by on that corner, he's not there. Well, guess what? Other individuals that once were residing there, they're no longer there either. So sometimes it takes for you to be creative, and not only just, we use that term so loosely, we got to meet them where they are. If I continue to meet him at this corner to say the same exact thing, then it means it holds no value. But at what point will I introduce him to something else that's gonna move him forward? We gotta start being visionaries to inspire them to think differently past just where they are at that moment, because sometimes being where you are, you will never elevate to that next moment, right? So I'm looking forward to this opportunity to introducing the kids at the Youth and Family Development Center to chess, to open up their minds to begin to think about their future and how they can use this game to transcend their lives for the better. But I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to not just chair Youth and Family Development one term, but twice. And whomever gets the opportunity to chair Youth and Family Development once I'm no longer here, then I hope that individual will be just as passionate as I am to make sure that every child has the opportunity to thrive in the community, no matter which community that they reside in. It shouldn't take a zip code to dictate, to say if this kid is going to be successful or not. It should signify that it doesn't matter which zip code that you live in, that everybody has the opportunity to rise to their full potential. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you all for your leadership and giving us the opportunity to serve the community the way we do. And Mayor Burke's vision and all those who support our staff, as you mentioned, Councilman Byrd, they're awesome in the trenches every day making it happen. So thank you all for your support.
All right, now we're going to adjourn from Youth and Family Development to, what's next? Planning and Zoning.
What a sight. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Planning and Zoning Committee meeting for January 8th. Thank you very much. I do have minute approval in a second. Thank you. Mr. Bridger,
Yes, sir.
had a good break?
Yeah, I did.
Good. Me too.
Ready for fast track.
Yeah, very good. All right. I know we have some things at the end of our meeting, so we're going to
Yes.
jump right in. And if you want to start off, let's go with resolutions under planning C, please.
You want me to, is that, are you going to read the caption or I just need
You
to
can jump
give a
right
quick-
in. Yeah.
I'm going to give a general synopsis. I'm going to turn it over to Phil if he has any additional details. But as I understand, this is just a renewal of an existing store, change of ownership. I don't have any detailed reports to offer. Just typical, as I understand it, when this is a change of ownership, it's pretty typical for council to approve. Is that fair? Phil?
Yes, sir. There is a provision, get my code up here, a provision in the city code that says that anytime there is a request for I guess, a liquor store to change its ownership, then it has to have a special exceptions permit for that to occur. Council is the one that enters that. It's not permitted for the Board of Zoning Appeals to do so, and that's required under the current zoning ordinance.
So I really have nothing else to add unless folks have, I can try to dig up some information before next week if you need it. But I'm assuming in the packet, there's some stuff from the city attorney's office about the request, so typically they quarterback this as far as getting the materials together.
Very good. Councilwoman Burrs, do you like anything on this? This is in your district. Are we good from our 1:30 conversation? Very good. You're welcome. Moving on to items next week, Tuesday, January 15th. Ordinances on first reading. Let's go with 6A, John.
Sure, and if I could have the PDF brought up, please, for this presentation. I'll give an overview of the request. This is a pretty complex one. This is a request to lift conditions on a property located off Ashland Terrace. Has a long zoning history. Councilman Mitchell might be pretty familiar with this. Started out as a guy who owned a furniture company, is wanting to do some additional things with this site. Has since changed ownership. There's a new owner, and they're looking at doing some on-site self-storage. So as you know, when you have a long list of conditions and the use changes and time changes, then you have to amend conditions. So that's kind of where we are with this request. All right, let's see what's going on. I'm trying to advance. Okay. So again, okay, so this is the zoning of the site. You can see, I think it is important to note, again, you see they outlined in blue, that a portion of the site is zoned R1, particularly the eastern, southern, and a portion of the western property boundary is zoned R1, intended as a transition from the more intensive C2 zone. You do have an existing C2, as you can see, to the west of this property, which will come up as part of our comments on the conditions modifications for this request. Here is the site plan of what's being proposed for this location. You can see they're going to have a climate-controlled self-storage facility in the front with your more traditional self-storage rentals in the back. As you can see indicated in the site plan, they would not be putting any structures in the R1 boundary to the south and east. This is that wonderful long list of conditions I was telling you about. So just kind of a note, mutual note to self, staff, and council, be careful what we ask for when we create conditions, because then it become difficult to untangle later on.
There's not a limit.
That's right. So it cuts both ways, as they say. So you can see the first set of conditions the applicant is not requesting any changes to. Those essentially limit the range of uses along the front portion of the property. Item number 2 deals with conditions and building setbacks and height controls for the rear portion of the property. And then item 3 deals with your natural vegetative buffer. So what they're asking to change are in sections 2 and 3. Section 2, you can see they're wanting to actually reduce the building setback on the southern property line to 90 feet. They're wanting to completely remove the setback requirement from the west property line and we'll go over that request in a minute. You can see they're also requesting to remove the retention of all existing easements condition. And then under items 3, they want to make a correction, and that is correct. They should refer to the east property line, not the south, as far as where that buffer would be located. That second bullet, they're wanting to reduce the buffer that's 80 feet on the south property line to 75 feet. And then the final is to eliminate the requirement to retain and maintain a existing cypress planted screen in the middle. So again, just a reminder, you've already got a 60-foot buffer of R1 to the east and an 80-foot to the south. I will say what we've heard mostly from the public comments has dealt with the southern property line. I know there's a number of residential properties to the south. They've got some concerns about being sure that the property is buffered and screened from view for those houses that exist to the south of the property. Again, you can see here they're wanting to reduce that setback or take away that setback requirement on the western property side, which is to the far left of the screen. There's an existing C2 zone already over there. So staff does not have any concern about eliminating that setback requirement because it's no longer being used for residential. It's zone C2. And as you know, commercial property, you can have buildings that are within 10 feet of each other in a C2 zone. The building setback, again, they were wanting to reduce it to 90 feet on the southern property line. Staff did not have any issue with that. Then you can see here, wanting to reduce the buffer from 80 to 75 feet. Staff did have concerns about any changes to that buffer because it's important for transition for those properties that abut this property to the south. We did not have any concerns about eliminating the condition of retaining, maintaining the Leyland cypress. Actually, as I understand, a lot of those trees there's been some concerns with the dieback, if I'm not mistaken, on that property to the south. And it's already grown up naturally, so if you're retaining a natural buffer, there's no need to specifically mention Leyland cypresses. So staff, as you know, approved, for the most part, recommend approval of the request with some changes, and I'll note those. We are okay, or actually we wanted to deny, the condition that we reduce the 80-foot buffer to 75 feet. Wait. I'm sorry, we want to deny, reducing the natural buffer reduction from 80 to 75. We think that's needed to the south. We are fine with amending the setbacks to 90, and part of that is because this is another nuance of zoning. Where that R1 boundary is, remember I was telling you about, let me go back to that zoning map. They see that yellow R1 is kind of right next to the red. You have to set back along that red line 25 feet to the rear. So there's already a 25-foot rear setback requirement along that line. So we don't see any need for that condition because the setback already governs that. So staff is fine with that. We're okay with taking the requirement of all existing easements are retained. There is a process by which easements have to be reviewed and approved to be abandoned. So if there are existing easements to be removed, it are public now, not private. Clearly, private's different. But any public easements, there would be a public review process for that, so we don't feel like that condition is needed. We're fine with lifting the condition of the 75-foot buffer from that western property line because it's already zoned commercial to the west. It makes sense to modify the reference for the 60-foot buffer to the eastern part of the property instead of the southern. That was a typo. And we're fine with removing, again, that Leland cypress planting requirement. At Planning Commission, there was one resident who came out and had some concerns to be sure that southern buffer was not reduced. So Planning Commission, after hearing from the applicant, the staff report, and the comments from the public, concurred with staff's recommendation with one exception. They basically added a clarifier that any, let me go down below here. Let's see. Actually, if you could scroll up, I'm sorry, the other way. That last paragraph, thank you, right there. Says, if any vegetation is damaged or removed, trees shall be, at a minimum of 2 inches or larger, shall be replaced on 2-for-1 basis. So if there's any loss of vegetation, this maintains that they'll be replaced, 2-for-1. So that was the only difference between the staff recommendation and Planning Commission record. So it's a qualified approval from both staff and PC.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. I do have Councilman Mitchell's light, so Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John,
Go back
find
to
me
the
a
site plan.
picture that, well, I tell you what, let's go to the conditions.
Okay, you get the final ones?
Right
Here?
here, right
Yep.
here. Just stay right here. Okay. We, it was actually, we actually approved this original change last term.
Okay,
And the reasoning given for the change was to build storage units.
right.
Since that occurred, there's probably been 10 storage units built, and it literally has become a yard for commercial vehicles, construction vehicles that are kept there overnight
Right.
and started up at 4 and 5 in the morning,
Okay,
and just really, the neighborhood, I guess the neighborhood's to the south, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes. Have really had a lot of problems with this. So I just want the council to know that next week, I can go along with the staff and planning commission's recommendations as it goes beyond, or as it talks about moving, boundaries of buffers and things like that. But I want to add a condition, and Mr. Attorney, I want to add a condition that says there'll be no overnight stay for commercial vehicles. And I want to add that to the no miniature golf courses, no.
so, and that, to just be clear, to make sure you cover, if we cover the entire property, you probably need to do that in items 1 and 2, because
Okay.
items 1 deals with the first 250 feet, and the item 2 deals with the rest of the property. So just be aware
Okay,
of
so
that.
we'll do that, and Mr. Nobbit, can you give me that version before we vote on it next week?
Yes, sir.
And I'll have an alternate for the council.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Very good.
What's one more condition?
Thank you, Councilman Mission. Any other comments or questions on this particular item? All right, John, let's move on to B.
All right, let's go to the next one. If we could pan through. I'm gonna let you drive. If you could pan down a little more, please. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, till you get to that. Thank you so much. Perfect. This is a request to rezone a property located at Jenkins and Standifer from R1 and C2 to C2 commercial to R1, C2, and R4 zones. As you remember, there was a rezoning request for a grocery store several months ago just to the north of this property. This is just south of that location. And they're wanting to do that for proposed commercial and office development. Can you please scroll to the next slide? Oh, there we go. If you look at the land uses, you do have kind of a mixed commercial office development across the street on the other side of Jenkins Road. You have residential to the south and west of this property. And again, to the north, you do have a vacant piece of property that has recently been rezoned commercial for a grocery store. If you look at the zoning pattern for this area, you've already got commercial zoning to the north and across the street to the east, as well as R4, but you do have R1 zone and uses to the south and west. The site plan submitted for this request shows 3 structures. To the left, if you see there's a dashed line kind of running through the middle of the property, and to the left of that is where the C2 is being proposed for 2 commercial structures. And then to the south, which is to the right on the screen, is another structure for office. They're proposing 2 points of access coming onto Jenkins Road. And you can see that there's a buffer. I know this is getting upside down, but on the bottom part of this property, which would be to the east, this is getting me direction. But to the west is proposed detention and buffer areas. Okay. We are currently in the process of finalizing the plan, the Area 12 plan, which includes this location. And that plan recommends a neighborhood center place type for this location. And neighborhood centers are small-scale retail areas servicing the local neighborhood or a group of neighborhoods. And they should have the intensity, scale, and design elements to be compatible with neighborhoods. And the uses could include retail shops, grocery stores, restaurants, offices, and residential. So we feel like this proposal is consistent with the summit, or I should say the Area 12 plan recommendations. But we do have some concerns about C2 being adjacent to those R1 zone properties and uses to the south and west. So to ensure adequate transition and buffering, we have these conditions that are suggested here, which is no dumpsters or structures within 50 feet of any R1 residential zone or use. Drive-throughs, auto-oriented uses, and many warehouses are prohibited, and limit of building height to 35 feet. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. There was an introduction of a fourth condition to be consistent with the grocery store to the north, offered by Councilman Ledford, to limit signs to a maximum height of 20 feet. So that was Planning Commission's recommendation to include staff's condition plus that one other. So it's a recommendation to approve with conditions from both Planning Commission and staff.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. This one is in my district, and given what we saw before, I think this is a much better use for that land in conjunction with what's being built across the street, which is more offices. So I think it promotes continuity. The additional conditions that were placed were agreed upon at Planning Commission, and I'm good with this so far.
Good.
Dr. Burrs?
Just one question,
Yes, ma'am.
John. These are great conditions, and they're conditions that we came up with several years back.
Mm-hmm.
Any reason why we didn't include the lighting component?
City code already controls off-site lighting.
Okay.
They already have standards that have to be directed away and no
Right.
off-site spillage.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure to
Sure.
protect the
Good question.
residences.
Thank
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning that. That's very important, and I appreciate it. Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, we will move forward to C.
Okay, this is at Main Street and Holtzclaw, a request to rezone a piece of property that's vacant currently from M1 to UGC for a commercial mixed-use development that also features some residential. The uses to the south, you may recall, we recently had a rezoning request to rezone that property that's being redeveloped, as well as for mixed-use residential and some commercial. You've got a railroad abutting the property to the northwest. You have Main Street to the north, and across the street, you also got some vacant and industrial buildings. So there's a mix of uses in this area. The zoning, again, you can see that while you've got C2 to the east, there have been some recent rezoning requests to the south and to the north to UGC, so there's some precedent already for this type of zone at this location. Let me go to the site plan. The site plan shows, again, four mixed-use commercial/residential buildings and townhouses to the rear. The site plan conceptually also shows some proposed points of access to this property. So just a reminder, we're not approving this site plan, we're approving the zone. This is just a concept drawing that the applicant is showing to illustrate their intentions. So looking at the request, staff felt like this was compatible with the comprehensive plan and is an appropriate extension of a UGC. So we recommend approve with just one condition. There is, as you know, in a particular urban environment, having pedestrian connectivity and walkability is very important for that to work. And along this particular stretch of Holtzclaw, I should say Central, make sure I get that right. Holtzclaw, that's right, Holtzclaw. There's not adequate right-of-way to include a sidewalk all the way down the southern portion that abuts this tract of land. So we added a condition to dedicate sufficient right-of-way along that frontage to accommodate a minimum 10-foot deep streetscape area to accommodate that sidewalk as specified by the Chattanooga Department of Transportation. So that's our recommendation. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve with that condition.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Councilman Byrd, are you good? No questions, no lights?
Okay.
We will move on to D, please.
All right. This is a request to rezone the former Harriet Tubman site from R3 and R4 to an M1 manufacturing zone to accommodate an economic development project, a job center. This is located in the 1900 block of Roanoke Avenue. If you look at the site, again, currently the site is vacant. It has sort of the residual streets that used to be there. We recently talked about the road abandonment, the right-of-way abandonment case that's associated with this. To the north, you have industrial uses. To the west, you have the railroad yard. To the south and to the east, you do have some established neighborhoods that across Roanoke Avenue and a little bit further to the south across Southern Street. It should be noted that the properties that you see that are vacant, you see right along just across Southern Street, those are all owned by the city of Chattanooga. So those are not under private property, that's under the city's ownership. There's some images of the site. If you look on the upper part of the screen, I know this is kind of hard to look at. The upper part is Southern Street. On the bottom part of the screen shows you looking into the property from Roanoke Avenue. If you look at the zoning, there is a mix of zoning in this area. The site itself is currently zoned R3 and R4. To the north and west, you have M1. To the east, where you have some of the existing residential, is R1. And to the south, you have a mix of C2 and R1 zoning. For a site plan, since there's not a specific vendor for this site at this time, what we ask for at least is what's called a site utilization plan. At least helps us understand where the points of access are proposed to be, where they would propose to use the property for industrial uses, and what buffering might be proposed. And this particular plan provided to us, it shows that the predominant access would come off of Scholler Avenue as far as trucking. Most of the site would be used for industrial with a 30-foot buffer around the entire property. It should be also noted this property is bisected by a couple sewer easements that does have some impact on the utilization of this site. So when we looked at this, we looked at several different points of reference to develop a recommendation. One is the 2004 Avondale Neighborhood Plan, which does recommend high-density residential for this location. I think it should be noted that when we made that recommendation, it was a housing site at the time. This was before it was demolished, and it was acquired by the city from the Chattanooga Housing Authority for the purposes of a major employer that would bring jobs to that location. So I think that does have implications for the policy recommendation for this location. I think it should also be noted that we are in the middle of an area plan process for this location. And so we have not developed a formal new policy recommendation for this site. That's pending completion of the area plan. But my understanding in speaking with the chamber folks and the ECD team is that there are several employers that are looking at this site. One of the key hangups has been having the zoning in place. And so even to be able to be considered as a finalist for a job, you got to have the zoning in place. And the concern is, losing that time window of having the site ready for use if we wait until the plan is complete. So there's a sense of urgency in getting it rezoned to be able to recruit an employer to this location. Again, I noted before, just repeat the statement that the properties front Southern Street, all those are owned by the city of Chattanooga. So again, so what we looked at as staff was, okay, if we know it's going to be a job site and there's a need for the M1 zoning to give some breadth in terms of what the kind of assembly or manufacturing that might be a potential vendor, we also had to balance that with protecting those adjacent residential uses, because M1 is a pretty wide open zone, right? So there could be things like foundries, chicken plants, boiler plants, things that would not be good neighbors for a neighborhood that we would need to consider about how you would limit those uses out so there would be not any impacts to adjacent residential areas. And it should be noted there are some existing M1 zones in the area, so there is some precedence for M1 without conditions, but we know as a good planning practice, you don't want to do that, right? A better approach is to have transition, ensure that you limit the uses allowed in M1 to minimize any potential off-site impacts on adjacent residential areas. So that's kind of our approach that we took. So let me go down here. So here's this slide. This is kind of what I was talking through. So we were looking at how to limit the uses, how to provide transition and separation from those residential areas, and how to address access, because there are some unknowns. We don't know how much traffic until a vendor's identified. So it's kind of hard to create a specific condition on what street to use until you know what vendor. So we wanted to be sure to create some conditions that would inform how that site is accessed to ensure that those transportation impacts are addressed. So we, let me go back to just get our recommendations. I'm going to jump down to the recommendations. All right, go up a little bit, thank you. So what we essentially recommend was to approve the rezoning of the M1 site with conditions. And those conditions, let me go here, but also retaining the R3 zoning along the Roanoke frontage to a depth of 150 feet. And there's an existing parcel along Southern that we recommended to stay R3. So we took the approach of, hey, let's kind of use that R, remember that R, oh my gosh, what's it, the case we just looked at with all the conditions. Ashland Terrace. You remember we had that R1 buff zone that served as a transition line. It's the same approach here. Use that residential zone as a buffer. It may not always stay R3. In fact, I could see it probably being rezoned to UG or UGC or something else in the future. But the idea is to retain that zone. It's kind of like a holding pattern. So if after the site is built out and the other portions of the site, you could then look at potentially ringing that development with some other types of infill development that would front along those residential portions of the site. So that was staff recommendation, to use that as a transition element. Also to add conditions limiting the uses on that M1, that we would basically eliminate all those noxious uses, blast furnace, boiler works, forge plants. You can see the long list. This came directly from the zoning code. And we added a catch-all phrase in case we missed something. B, any use having a similar impact or in character to the above is also prohibited, I'm sorry. So that way, if I didn't catch it up there, if something has the same impact as those kinds of uses, it would be prohibited. Secondly, for looking at transportation, prior to receiving any permit, so before you can pull the permit to do your stormwater, you have to do a transportation impact study submitted to Chattanooga Department of Transportation that looks at what your employee traffic counts are across shifts. What is your shipping and receiving looking like? And it should be multimodal, so we're not just talking about cars. How do people get there? By walking, biking, transit. So it looks at all those things and makes recommendations to whatever road improvements or points of access should be made before you pull your permit. So that way there's a good plan in place to ensure it's appropriately accessed in a way that's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And then D, no dumpsters or loading areas or activities permitted within 200 feet of any residential zoned area. We've done that in the past too, where we've limited loading or dumpster areas adjacent to residential areas to ensure there's not any noise concerns. So that was staff's recommendation. At Planning Commission, there was opposition. There's a substantial amount of community interest on this project. I'm sure they'll be here next week. And so they presented their concerns. I'm sure they will next week. But after hearing from the staff and the public's comments, Planning Commission concurred mostly with staff's recommendation with one exception. You see here, instead of drawing the line also along Southern Street, or as far as the back, they approved actually rezoning the M1 to the Southern Street boundary. So that's a little different than what staff recommended. Do y'all see that? So they retained the R3 buffer along Roanoke, but actually considered allowing the Southern Street, or the M1 to extend to Southern Street to the south. So that's the only difference between the Planning Commission and staff recommendation. So again, the same prohibitions on uses, the requirement for a transportation impact study, and the limitations on dumpsters. So I'll stop there.
Very good. Thank you, John. That was very thorough, and I know this is of great concern to a lot of folks. So I do have Councilman Byrd's light. I'm going to go to you first, please, sir.
Go back.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bridger.
Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the prohibited uses?
Sure.
And before we dive into that, it's a lot of conversation about the urgency or why such urgency. Sharita, maybe she can come up and answer that question. That has been the forefront of a lot of conversations that we are trying to push or use urgency and make this go through. So can you speak to that for me?
Sure. Good afternoon, Council. I joined the city in roughly August of 2017. I started having conversations with Avondale in September of 2017 to talk about bringing jobs to this site. I also started having conversations with the Chamber of Commerce about bringing jobs to the site. And so the impediment was always, one, the due diligence and the studies had not been completed on the site. And two, the site was not zoned for jobs. So I said, I'm going to start, looking into starting the process. The Chamber made us aware of a site development grant through the state of Tennessee. We applied, we knew we wanted to apply for that grant. So December 1st of 2017, we applied for that grant. And at that time, we applied knowing that if we were to be awarded that in the following spring, and that spring of 2018, we would then take that award, complete our due diligence studies, and then after those due diligence studies, we would apply through the state in January of 2019 to have the site certified for economic development. That then allows us to market around the world that we have a site that's ready for job creation versus we have a site that's suitable for it but there are things that have to happen before job creation could happen. So that was our goal. So we knew in August of 2017 that this would be a 2-year process. So there's no urgency other than we're still implementing a 2-year plan, recognizing that in January of 2019, the state will open up the process for certification of sites for job creation. And we wanted to be in a position to place this particular site in the kitty to be approved through the state, recognizing that the state gets it, it doesn't guarantee it's going to be approved as,
Right.
for site, as a certified site. That process then takes through July of 2019. June, July is when that would happen. So again, we knew back in August of 2017 that our goal was to have the site certified within July of 2019, roughly, and we're simply implementing that process. Now, we did not know when we started the process that RPA was going through the Area 3 plan. So we did reach out to RPA to say, we're going to start this process. Now, when we reached out in August or September of 2017, at that point, I don't think it had been announced when the Area 3 plan would start. But somewhere along the way, I did talk to John Bridger, and he said, you know, you will have to have a public meeting, and you will also have to adhere to RPA recommendations for the site. So we knew that all along the way. But we also knew that we were still going for job creation on the site, and this was just part of the process. And we feel like that throughout this process, we've heard from the community, and we have altered and made changes to, you know, what we envisioned would be a job creator on the site. So that the prospect that we're talking to, or the multiple prospects that are looking at the site now, are very different from the prospects that we even entertained, you know, a year and a half ago. And some of that is because the community has spoken, and we're hearing what they want. We're hearing that they don't want, you know, a company that has lots of trucks moving up and down Scholler. They would rather have the company that's using the rail access. You know, we're hearing that they want companies that have career ladder positions. They don't want an organization that's a manufacturer with a lot of low-wage jobs. They want the kind of jobs that people can then grow into and promote up. We heard that. We're hearing they want multiple things on the site. We recognize that. So we're not looking for a company now that takes up the entire site. That was very different from when we started this process. So as painful as it has been, we have heard the community, and we're incorporating some of those pieces into it. But it's also looking at, you know, we're looking at a company that's sustainable. We're looking at a company that's willing to help us with that sewer line that bifurcates the site. Actually, it's in 3 different places on the site, which really and truly is why we had to go for so much M1 zoning on the site, because it's not a clear rectangle. We can't just draw a rectangle. We're dealing with a triangle and a trapezoid, and then another weird sort of, you know, site that's just south of the school. And so again, it's looking at a site that's not a perfect site, that has issues with it, but it also has now conditions on it, and then also has recommendations from the community. And so, you know, we're looking for a very special kind of project that's going to fit all of those parameters. And in order to make that happen, we're asking for M1 zoning on most of the site to give us that flexibility to find a company that meets all of those other parameters, recognizing we're also looking at a company that's willing, again, to help us move the sewer line, a company that's willing to do a community benefits agreement, a company that's willing to be sustainable and environmentally friendly, you know, a company that's not an old school, what we think of old school manufacturing. Manufacturing is very high tech, and it's clean. It's very different than it was 50 years ago.
Right.
So again, we're looking for that kind of manufacturer, but we recognize, you know, this is an odd process. Usually that kind of company comes to the table first, and then they ask to rezone it. But what happens is when we're competing, companies that are making 10, 50, 25, $75 million decisions, there's not one person that makes a decision. They take that through their own committee process. They take that through their own board of directors. And what we're saying is we want the maximum flexibility with M1, recognizing there are all of these conditions and then all of these requirements from the community, so that the next time we're on a short list, before they go to their board of directors, they have a site that's already been certified, they have a site that has already been rezoned, and they have a site where the community has said, this is the kind of company we want, versus having them bring a competitive site from another city to the table, and our site, which isn't rezoned and doesn't have the approval to move forward. So that's, it may look urgent, but we've been working on this since 2017, so it's really not.
Gotcha. And then the other question, I hear a lot about mixed use. And so when I hear about affordable housing or any type of housing to go on the site or even go near the site, isn't it, doing my research, the property that the city owns is on Southern, I would believe?
That is correct.
From Roanoke, starting at Southern on down, the city owns that. And is it true that those parcels of properties have to be residential, that they're zoned to be residential?
My understanding is they were purchased with HUD dollars, and there are requirements that restrict them to being residential.
Okay, so.
And so again, prospects that we are having conversations with and have had, we make that very clear. You're coming into a neighborhood. You would be located in a community where people live and work and kids are playing and there's a school nearby and there's going to be housing nearby. So again, manufacturers who don't want to be near housing completely remove themselves from the conversation, which is great. It makes it easier for us. Again, we've got to look at those ratios. How many companies do you entertain before you find that one that likes the site, that likes the neighborhood, that's willing to do all the things we're asking them to do, and then also meet our requirements for partnering with us on moving that sewer. And honestly, moving the sewer will enable us to put multiple things on the site. Because right now, that's sort of an impediment to just drawing, okay, let's draw a rectangle near the rail line and put them there. Well, if you find a prospect that doesn't want rail, but wants to be near the north of the site, near other M1, well, now we're coming back through this whole process to ask for the rezoning of the northern part of the site. So that's why we ask for sort of that big blocks to enable us to have the flexibility to find the right kind of project using community feedback, using council feedback, using, honestly, what the market is telling us, which is M1 prospects are looking at it, using that kind of feedback to be able to find just the right project that's the best fit for this particular community.
When I look at Southern Street and have done some conversation and walked up and down through the community, people did want housing and people wanted job creation as well. Across the street, you have a commercial site, the Okie Doke.
Correct. Little blue building, little
Yes,
one-level blue
the
building.
long rectangle building. And it's for sale now at $100,000. And in the past 2 years that I've been in council as well, trying to get people to purchase that property has been hard to do. And a lot of times when we see the Area 12 plan that was rolled out, the thing that's different about that community and that area is that you had so many people buying in to the plan. And it is a plan. And if you can get people to buy into the plan, it's amazing. And without a plan or with a plan, people that I talk to and developers that I'm coming in contact with are not looking to buy into the plan. But the narrative that I'm hearing, or buy into the community, and the narrative that I'm hearing now is that with the Area 3 plan, that people would be more apt to buy into it and say, hey, I want to invest in this community. And then I also noticed that when you create these types of plans and people create an opportunity for people to buy into, people want incentives and want different things to say, hey, well, if I buy into this, what is the city going to give me? What are you all going to give up? And still around the facility, I know it's a church called Miracle that's across the street. They own probably 9 parcels in that community. I went to talk to the pastor there, and he's looking to put housing and vet housing on the parcels that he owns around it. The guy, Okie Doke, is looking to sell it. And then there's another facility called Z&J Grocery that's, I think, down Scholler, something of that nature. And he's trying to sell his for $75,000. And still, no matter how many developers or people that I talk to, they're not buying in. But the misconception that we're hearing is that people are beating down the door to buy these properties. People are coming to Chattanooga to buy these properties. And even now I see where, Mr. Leffert is heading up the steep slopes and floodplains for people to build on. And it's just, can you speak on to that point to where the people are coming in, or is it that factual that people are beating down the doors that you don't have to compete when it comes to trying to sell land in Chattanooga?
I think it depends on market forces and it depends on the assets of the area.
Mhm.
And so where we're seeing people beat down doors in other areas, sometimes it's because they are in close proximity to work centers. Either
Mhm.
they're close to downtown, or they're close to existing retail, or they're close to, an amenity that might be a tourism kind of amenity. Again, it's a function of where the market is in any particular time, and our goal is to create a catalytic project that would make things happen in that community. Because again, if you're looking at creating the kind of project on a site that's been vacant for the last 4 years,
Right.
that is bringing 200 jobs, 250 jobs to a site, again, that's catalytic for a neighborhood. So that now all of a sudden, the commercial, the small mom and pop commercial that's not working might start to flourish, because now you've got people who are walking in and around, those storefronts where you haven't had that for 4 years. So again, it's sort of, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
It's like, do you create the retail? Well, the retail happens when you have bodies with disposable income, and sometimes that's related to housing. You bring in high-density housing, and sometimes it's related to, employment center. You bring in an employer that's bringing in jobs, and people want coffee in the morning, they want lunch in the afternoon, they want to hang out after work. Again, it's sort of figuring out, what could be the catalytic driver in that particular community to kind of make some things work. It could be housing, it could be job creation. We're saying that it could be job creation.
With the school that's on the site, that's off from the site, that's owned by the county.
Correct.
Have we had any conversations about when a facility or a prospect comes to that site, if it happens, what would happen with the school? Are we looking to partner with the county or do anything with the school? Have those conversations happened?
The county is willing to partner with us on that particular site to either assemble with the parcel or use it or make it available for a compatible use. So again, there's been conversation about a technical school, there's been conversation about community centers, any other sort of public amenities, and those could be part of any particular project. But again, that would be in partnership with the county making that happen, recognizing that that's not something the city would manage, but the city could facilitate some of those conversations.
Okay. And if the facilities, if it is changed to M1, what authority does this body have? Could the mayor, the staff, or, I guess economic and community development, could it just be sold and not vetted through the council? So say if, quote unquote, the Amazon or Volkswagen wanted to come there and set up a shop in that facility, that then, will it have to be vetted through this council and through this body? Or could the city, the mayor, his staff just go ahead and sell it off without any input from us?
Yeah, I'll make sure our city attorney corrects me on this, but my understanding is that this body, the city council, would have to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement for any kind of sort of partnership with this particular site.
Is that true?
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so when you say any type of partnership, that's any type of trade-off, any type of sale, any type of anything that's happening on the site outside of sale would have to get vetted through this body first.
Yes, anything. And so essentially what would happen is, if we were to find a prospect that would be interested in gaining access to the site, we would ask for a site plan. Essentially, how much of the site are you looking for? Are you looking for 10 acres? Are you looking for 20 acres? Are you looking for 30 acres? How much space do you need? And then look at, okay, where do you think you would site your buildings? And again, with the sewer line now, if we're looking for a large employer that needs a certain square footage and parking, they would have to split that into 2 buildings, which is why we're asking for a larger site. If we're looking for someone smaller, they might need a smaller part of the site, and they could put parking lot over the sewer line. Again, it's sort of looking at what configuration they might need, and then bring that. That would then start the conversation through the Economic Development Committee, and then it would come to this particular council for the council to then authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement. Now, that doesn't mean that site that they provide is the site design that the city would finally approve, because we would send out and have a master developer look at developing the site so that it is compatible with, RPA and what we're saying, the transitioning into the neighborhood would look like.
And Mr. Bridger, with the Area 3 plan, it is what it says, a plan. Like, so this is something that is not written in stone, but something that the city is looking forward or looking towards something happening in these communities. So with that Area 3 plan, we can have variations of things that can happen with
That's right.
that site, or you can say, hey, you know, just because we zone it M1 at this time, you know, and we don't get the prospects coming in, or someone says there's too many conditions for us even to deal with this or have this headache on us, we're not gonna deal with it. But then say someone comes in and say, hey, we wanna go ahead and build some apartments over here. That conversation or that zoning can take place, and
That's
that
right.
plan can still have different variations of what can go in that site. It doesn't mean it is locked in.
Well, yeah, you call it zoning, just detects use, plan is just a guide.
It's
It's
just
a guide, it represents going through a public process as well as planning expertise, and, you know, basically come with a policy recommendation. So when we have future rezoning requests, we have a kind of a playbook to go by. But ultimately, decisions are rest with you as council. So it just helps to understand how the pieces fit together to create place, ultimately. And so we always look at like Tubman, when we talk about the Avondale plan, it recommended housing because that was there at the time.
Right.
So we envision that there will be other centers and locations that we want to try to think about what could happen, what would change. But it is a recommendation at a point in time. That's why it's a guide. It's not a zoning code, it's a guide, because we want to know what the community's desires are, what the aspiration, what the vision is. But as you know, 5 years from now, things can change. Housing
Right.
has changed a lot
Right.
from the early 2000s. So that's why it's use every tool for their purpose, right? The plan is a decision-making guide. This is a rezoning request for economic development.
Thank you. Just right quick, Mr., not to bring him up, but I just wanted to echo to Mr. Moreland and to Ms. Evelyn Holmes, Ms. Sharp, and other people in the with the community that, you know, even with that being said, this guide that we're getting in place and these observations that we're trying to have happen, that definitely from this point on, if this thing is moved to M1, that we work together and we be very strategic about how we do it and how we come together and sit down and have monthly meetings to say, hey, these are the things that we would like and these are the things that we would not like. Ms. Sharita has been a very open vessel to say, hey, Councilman, these are the things that I've been looking at. This is what I'm thinking is going forward. And I think if we continue to have these conversations, all of the misconceptions can get thrown out the window, and we can create something that everyone can enjoy, and we can take care of the kids and the children who are coming up that will be either getting these jobs or living in these facilities, because as I say, sometime a lot of us are up in age now to the point where we're not looking to move, we're comfortable where we are, we're not looking for those job creations or job situations. So I just hope that, you know, if this is moved forward as M1, that, you know, the Unity Group, Ms. Burnshaw, Ms. Holmes, all of us can continue to sit down and work together to make sure that we stay on top of it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman. And before I move to Dr. Burrs, I saw John's pen and Judy's pen go down. We're working collectively on steep slope and floodplains to develop better standards. So I'm not working to, just a point of a clarification. We're not working to.
Yes.
I want to make sure we get that clear. I heard that. We're working together as a team to create better standards moving forward. Dr. Burrs, please.
Yeah, you kind of lost me on steep slopes too. I thought,
Yeah.
whoa.
I had a lot fall on me all of a sudden, and I was like, whoa, whoa.
Thanks, Rita. I thought that was great. I'm totally in favor of this. I have been since you started, and what I loved hearing was how it's morphed into what it is now that looks like a win-win situation. Let me be really clear about one issue. The city owns all of this property, correct?
Correct.
And so the city can pick and choose who or what they want to happen here and what conditions they want to happen here, right? Yes, no?
That would be a yes based on the conditions that
Yeah.
have been outlined. Yes.
I'm just repeating what you said.
Right.
You said you were going to be looking for people who would meet the needs of what we want there. So we're in a great position. And so it could be win-win with housing and jobs and whatever. You will have the right to say no to an industry. I love what you've put here about the noxious industries and all of that. They're great protection. But still, the final presentation is up to you, and the final yay or nay is up to us.
Correct.
On every one of those issues, right?
Correct.
And so what you're asking for from us is just the flexibility to make happen what we've said we want happen and what the community. Good job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. Councilwoman Coonrod, you are next.
Thank you so much, Chair. First, I want to say to Jermaine and Sharita, thank you so much for being advocates for, making sure that the urban gaps, those issues are addressed, and specifically when we're talking about economic equality. So that's very important. And when I look at that community, I remember when the community destroyed a lot of lives. There was a lot of crime in the Harriet Tubman site, a lot of drug transactions happening, a lot of inappropriateness that was taking place on that site. And to have it demolished, and just really thankful for Mr. Moreland and the crew back then that was really advocating for jobs. And when we say jobs, a lot of people are like, oh, well, jobs, and I've heard this multiple times, but we don't need jobs in this community. Well, when you have the poverty level that it is in this community, and you have 82% of the Avondale community and surrounding community that's renters, low income, working jobs that they barely still can make ends meet. And when you're talking about the income of that community is under $9,000 a year, and to say that jobs is not warranted in this community, like I just don't understand that part of it. And although I've heard, the rumblings about mixed use for this community, mixed use would be great. It looks great as a visual in my mind for this community. But we have to start thinking about the reality of the community that we're talking about, right? And I do appreciate that you guys took into consideration what the community has asked for. And we often hear as council representatives, well, they're not listening to us as a community. I listen to the people that's in that immediate community. Those are the people's lives that's gonna be touched. And out of the 100 people that I touched, knocked on their doors, or either called in the Avondale community, they were on board for this to happen, for the M1. Now, although I can appreciate the enthusiasm of people that's jumping on the train that don't live in the community of or haven't had the privilege to actually live in an impoverished community, to advocate on what they feel is what the community would need or what their desire for that community to take place. But it's very important for the community, the people that live there, to showcase and highlight what exactly that their needs are. And looking at the demographics, I'm sure that we have enough people that work for the city of Chattanooga and also work for the chamber that understand what that data means and what's needed for that community to move lives forward, right? And that's the mission of what we're trying to do, is make sure that we're providing stable workforces for people to get into, to move their lives forward and not just continue to be a part of a system that is systemically known to oppress, to keep groups of individuals oppressed. And I will say this, and then I'm gonna leave it alone, is that we also have to be mindful of people that champion to say what a community needs. And they can often say, and sometimes it gets cloudy in my own head to say, well, we wanna make sure that these groups of people are empowered enough to move to the next level. However, once we afford that opportunity to that, we also have those people that come in and say, oh, well, that's not exactly what we meant. We actually mean that we want this or we want that. We're past that. It's 2019. We don't have time to play games with the lives of people
that's only making $9,000 a year and struggling to decide if they can feed their families or if they can pay rent. We can't gamble putting a coffee shop where they're gonna sell a cup of coffee for $5 and people are trying to scrape up change to buy a loaf of bread. And so this is something that I'm most definitely going to support. And I just appreciate, Sharita, you coming in 2017 and just, was excited enough to even roll up your sleeves and lace up your shoes and say, this is a community I want to focus on. Because since the demolition of the housing development, nobody was really paying attention to it. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gilbert.
Hello.
Hello.
I tell you off the bat, I do not like N1s, period. But I know it's a need for them, but I don't like them. I know that when we developed Enterprise South, we did not change completely N1. We did it in sections as people come about. It's a possibility. You got 43 acres over there total. And I think out of that 43, 7 is R3. Could it not be a possibility that we do an N1 on just 30 acres? Because you have certain companies, like for example, you got FedEx on Shallowford, you have West at the airport, you have M&M, you have HomeServe, you have Gestapo on Jersey Pike, less than 30 acres. Some are 30, some are less than 30 acres. Could we not do that and then turn the other 13 into a thing outside the box and create something different? Because I know everybody wants jobs. Everybody said they want jobs, which is great, but there's no guarantee that their jobs are going to be in a community. And we've seen it before in other areas, that we got jobs, but a lot of them jobs are not Chattanooga jobs. And then some of the Chattanooga jobs are temp jobs. And in temp jobs, you don't have the same quality of benefits, especially on health care. So I will throw that out there. Is it a possibility that we can look at 30 acres to present instead of doing the whole 43 in L1?
Right now, with the way the sewer lines bifurcated, it would be difficult to do that. And so essentially, we have a 35-acre site with all of the roads and right-of-way. Once we abandon those, that puts us up to that 44-acre site. And then what we're looking at is, again, if we were to bifurcate, if we were to try and carve out that 30 acres, we still have that sewer line in the middle that makes it difficult to do that because you can't build on that. I mean, you could put a parking lot on top of it, but you're not able to build on it. So the issue is, where do you make that, how do you divide that 30 acres? Where do you put your line?
And these sewer lines you're speaking of, these are the ones that we approved for X amount of millions of dollars in the past? These are the ones we already put down?
The council actually, in January or so of 2017, it predates me. The council did not approve moving the sewer line. So essentially, it is a 27-inch sewer line that's 15 feet deep. It's made out of terracotta. You are not able to build on top of it. It goes diagonally across the site, and then there's another arm that connects it over to Roanoke. And so that sort of limits where you could put your structures, which is why, you're looking for kind of a needle in a haystack when you start talking about let's parcel out 30 acres. Where do you put the 30 acres given those two sewer lines?
So in other words, if we go N1 for 43 acres, do we still have to change the sewage lines anyway?
Our goal is to find a prospect that's willing to do a public-private partnership with us to move the sewer lines, because we, as a city, have not budgeted to move that sewer line.
No, but in the future, for sewage lines goes, you saying that the company potential company that's going to come there are going to partner with us to go half and half or 1/4 or what?
Our recommendation would be that any development that happens on the site, that we put in new sewer, because essentially you're looking at 70-year-old sewer line, and if you were to look at a combination of different uses on the site, if you're looking at putting $100 million into construction and development on a site, you would want new sewer. You would want new sewer lines.
So in other words, we said we're going to put sewer lines in. So right now, we can put them anywhere we want to put them that makes sense, even on 30 acres versus 43 acres.
We are currently working, that's part of the due diligence. We're looking at where we could reasonably put sewer lines or move sewer lines.
So we could do a 30-acre project with L1, because we're gonna move sewer lines anyway, and then relieve the other part of it to some kind of other development that we can develop in that particular area, especially already got 7 acres we can't touch anyway.
This is true.
So we add to the
We
7.
We realistically could. And so our goal, again, is to find an anchor project for the site. But again, we don't know if we are looking at an anchor project that needs 10 acres or 15 acres or 30 acres.
That's true. That's what I was saying, that a lot of companies we have now, that smaller companies, Gasop, which supplies VW, and you got M&M Place, they're under 30 acres, or right at 30. So that's why I was bringing that part up, because the company coming in is going to be about the same size, most likely. I know it don't be a VW because it's too big. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, John. For the sake of the item we're actually voting on,
Yes, sir.
you showed that it's partially R3, partially R4, and then you showed two diagrams, one that specified two sides that could remain R3, and then another diagram where it only had one side.
That's
as
correct.
R3. Which item will be on our agenda to vote for? The one
Yeah.
that has it on one side or both sides?
The planning version, so it's, planning version is always first and there's staff. So the staff version has both sides. Planning version has just one side.
Is there more significant differences between the planning and staff version other than that?
No.
Okay. Thank you. And then the area plan that has been discussed, what's the timeline for its completion?
We probably have a draft done until May.
Draft in May. Looking at doing an M1, what would be the significant difference between an M1 on this site or an M2 or a different type of manufacturing zone?
Sure.
Is there a reason for one as opposed
Sure.
to two, or?
We asked that same question. We talked to the applicant, because usually we try to have like M2, a lighter industrial zone, but the problem is M2 does not allow you to do even light manufacturing. M2 is for assembly and distribution. So any kind of, like a couple of the vendors they had, I think one was a paint vendor, you could not do on a M1 site, or M2 zone. So they need the M1 for the manufacturing component. So what we tried to do was to allow that type of activity, but to remove all the noxious related manufacturing activities associated with that.
Okay, two sides. That's all I needed. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chairman. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Smith was hitting on my question. John, now we're the applicant, city's the applicant, right?
City's the applicant, that's correct.
How does the applicant version differ from the other two versions that's on here?
The applicant requested the entire site, with the exception of a 30-foot buffer around the property, to be zoned M1.
Okay, so
sir.
so the applicant's version is well, it's got an R4 on here, but, huh? Yeah, but you've just got a 30-foot buffer. You wouldn't have that strip of R4 or R3,
That is correct.
Okay. And then tell me again, because I'm sort of visual and
Sure.
I was listening. The staff version is the two sides? Okay.
It's, so I think Southern Street and Roanoke is the staff version, which is the north-south street.
Yeah.
And then PC left the buffer, or the transition just along Roanoke, not along Southern,
And that's the only difference.
That's the only difference between the planning commission-
Well, I say the three versions.
between the two.
Yeah, well, is that the only, so the buffer is the difference in the third version, in the applicant
That's correct.
version?
And no, but there's no conditions, though. I think the applicant was, of course, they were just requesting rezoning. So
Oh,
there are
okay,
no
there was no
conditions.
conditions
No.
in the applicant version?
No.
Okay, all right.
Good, Councilman? Yep. All right, thank you very much. I'm seeing no lights further, so I will ask us, John, take a deep breath. And let's go to E.
I can get activated again. Thank you, Sharita.
And thank you, everyone, for your comments.
Okay, I'm going to try to go a little quick to wrap. I think I have one more case. This is a request, similar location, not far from the one we just saw at Holtzclaw. This is a request to rezone a site. If y'all know the Brain Brothers property off Main Street, they're wanting to rezone their site from, let me go back. It's locked me out again. Okay. From M1, as it's currently zoned, to C3. which I will say, this is usually we try to encourage C3 zones in the CBD area. This is outside that, as I'll show here in a minute. Let me jump right here. You can see the C3 policy boundary. This is outside that. I think at the time they were requesting it really just have maximum flexibility for how they would like to redevelop the site. Staff basically considered UGC a more appropriate zone. There's already some precedent for UGC along this area, so that's essentially what we recommended was UGC, which is consistent with other rezoning requests along Main Street. At Planning Commission, to my knowledge, the applicant was fine with the UGC. So there was no opposition. Both staff and PC recommended approval of this request. So it's just basically taking a site that's off of Main Street. There is no immediately abutting residential to rezone to UGC for mixed-use development. That's all I got. Any questions? There's a one item, you all tell me how much time you got. Can I get 10 minutes, or you guys got to go eat?
John, we're here to serve.
I don't want to get any bad terms. You know, I'm coming between meal and 6 o'clock.
But hang on, I don't have any lights on this item, but I would like to give Councilman Byrd a chance to respond to that particular case if he'd like. Are you good? No, I'm good with that. You're good, okay, thank you very much, okay. Hang on one second, I do have Councilman Henderson, if you would, please.
I want to backtrack something
Yes,
I
sir.
was thinking about. Can you calculate for us at a later point the acreage that would be left in the M1?
For all those options?
For all those options.
I will do.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman. Go ahead, John.
We have one other report, and I think a request that y'all going to be giving to us in a minute. We have an ADU report. As you recall, about 4 or 5 months ago, we came with an initial concept, and you gave us some feedback, said, hey, do some more homework. There's been a lot of work done by the Development Services team. Emily's going to present a synopsis. If you can give us about 6 or 7 minutes to do a speed review, would that suffice?
Let me ask my colleagues.
That's what I'm saying. I want to make sure I don't.
A nod, either yes or no, as I look around. Everyone good?
All right.
I'm not
you're
seeing
on.
much head movement, so.
Can bring up the PDF for the ADU presentation, please? And I'm starting stopwatch right now. No, don't want to make her nervous or anything.
Good evening. I'll try to be brief.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. So, as you may remember, I spoke about our ADU project back in September. Now I'm here just for a follow-up. So this is just what I was going to talk about, skim through that. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that staff has gone through some public outreach over the last few months. You can see there all the outreach that we've done, so I won't go into detail unless you have specific questions, but we've tried to reach out to all the various neighborhood community groups as well as development real estate community for input on the project. And then part of that included a survey that we placed on our website. So I'm going to quickly go through these survey results. I'm happy to send the PDF to you so you have more time later to review, since I was hoping to have a little more time. But just to be respectful of your dinner, I will quickly go through and just try to hit the highlights. So the first question was just a demographic on who you are living in the city. As you can see, the primary answer was for property owners within the city that responded to the survey, in blue there. Question 2 was just asking if you think the council should adopt an ADU ordinance. As you can see, the significant answer with up to 85% of respondents said yes. Question 3 was, if allowed, for what reasons would you construct an ADU? We had various choices, including elderly family members, rental income, visitors, personal use, disabled family members, adult child, none, and other. Some of the other choices included home office, helping people get on their feet, temporary housing, and affordable housing. There was a bit of a range of choices, but elderly family member was the number one selected. Question 4, where should ADUs be located within the city? Again, overwhelmingly, it was for citywide. And then other options included short-term vacation rental, boundary, urban overlay, nowhere within the city, and other. And other included outside of city core, dependent on property size in rural areas. And just as a reminder, I showed this map the last time, just for some reference on the boundaries there. The yellow is the urban overlay, the black hatching is the short-term vacation rental, and the red is the form-based code. Question 5, should there be restrictions requiring the ADU or the main house to be owner occupied? It was about split at 87%. Oh, excuse me. Yes, I'm on the right one, sorry. Yes, about split saying yes and then no, and then others were unsure. And then the last question, question 7, what types of limitations or restrictions should be included in the regulations? Again, we had a bit of a range, but 73% suggested, which was the highest number there in yellow, that there should be a maximum number of ADUs allowed on one lot. And then the other choices included limiting the size of the ADU, building height, maximum lot coverage, design guidelines, on-site parking, and no limitations. And then the other included things like no required parking or parking on the street, no front yard ADUs, prohibited in historic districts, and ADU proportionate to the size of the lot. So based on all of that, including all the other public comments that we'd received over the last few months and through the duration of the project, as well as from city staff, staff has a few more recommendations that we'd like to move forward and then bring you the ordinance, hopefully in the next few months. The first would be to allow ADUs citywide. Originally, as we discussed before, to consider citywide as well as urban overlay or short-term vacation rental boundary, but as seen by survey results, overwhelmingly it's in support citywide, and staff tends to agree because it would be more fair and consistent for both the homeowner and the city. And so what should allow them for anyone, everybody within the city limits. Also, just to allow detached ADUs at this time and not attached. And that was based on the conversation from the last meeting where there was concern of duplexes in an R1 zone, so that's why we're just recommending detached. The third item would be no design standards, even though there was some support for that, and I know Councilman Ledford asked that during the last meeting to consider that, but staff's reasoning for not including them in the standards would be for that we don't require them currently for any other type of building construction outside of form-based code. So again, for consistency, it just makes sense not to require it for the ADU, because why would that one particular building type have to have design standards while other building types do not? And also, it would be very hard to come up with a set of design standards that would match each individual neighborhood, because each neighborhood's character is very unique. And so instead of having a citywide design standard, staff would rely more on each neighborhood's restrictive covenants that may have design standards, as well as the historic design standards that are regulated by the Zoning Commission. And then lastly, not requiring owner-occupied restrictions, even though 51% of respondents of the survey would like to see that. Staff is suggesting no at this time because it comes down to an enforcement issue. It would be very hard to enforce owner-occupied restrictions for the Land Development Office, and it also could provide less flexibility for the homeowner. For example, if a homeowner would like to construct an ADU for an elderly family member, let's say, but they may be a part-time Chattanooga resident and reside elsewhere other parts of the year, or if somebody wanted to travel for an extended period of time, if the regulations were written in a way that would consider that as non-occupying, an owner not occupying the home, then it would prohibit them potentially from having an ADU. So with that, staff is suggesting that we will share the ordinance with you after this meeting for review, and then we'd like to bring the final ordinance to the Planning Commission on February 11th, and then to City Council in March for final adoption. So I'm happy to meet with you individually if you have specific questions or comments or concerns once you've seen the final ordinance and have time to review it, or I'm happy to answer any questions now. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Emily. I know you were hurrying through that, and I appreciate it. I do have two lights on. Councilman Henderson is first.
Emily, when we say no design standards, are we also referring to size and location on property?
No, that's a good question, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. That would just meaning, building materials, window design. Staff is addressing design standards in the ordinance by restricting the size, the height, and the location. So hopefully that would be enough to kind of limit, where it can go on the lot and how big it is. So that would, in a sense, regulate the design somewhat. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman. Dr. Burrs, you're next.
How many respondents did you have?
There were 170.
170 out of the whole city?
Mm-hmm.
Do you count that as a meaningful response?
I'm not sure. We tried as hard as we could to get as much response as we could. I would say that it probably would have been better if we had been able to get more response that wasn't internet-based, but we tried with meeting individual homeowner groups and the neighborhood roundtable to getting the word out and asking them to spread the word to their community
response
groups.
is 10 to 30% of a population, so it kind of lacks validity, but I was just curious about that. When you're talking about design standards, so that's a little loose when you say there's no design standards. You can just talk about placement, but then it could be a boxcar, right?
Well, it would have to meet all building and construction code requirements.
So it's a fixed-up boxcar.
Well, we don't have any design standards for a single-family house or any other type of house or
I'm talking about
building in a-
protection of the neighborhoods, and the thing is that you talked about neighborhood covenants, and most neighborhoods don't have covenants. Covenants only occur when you've got a homeowners association, but most neighborhoods have neighborhood association, but there's no covenants. So if there's no protection for the neighborhoods, and you may want to rethink that. And also the last thing, if it's citywide and it doesn't have to be owner occupied, then it's another way of having a short-term vacation rental. Or two, actually. I mean, there's some unintended consequences. I'm not against what you're trying to do, but we have a habit around here of having unintended consequences because we don't think things through to the other end. And if we're rushing it to next month, gosh, I see a lot of stuff here that could cause us grief later on. I think the basic idea is a good one for all kinds of reasons. And unfortunately, we make laws. We have to be really careful of the people that don't want to do the right things. So I would suggest that you do a little more thinking about this. But only 170 responses, and I know you tried, but I think maybe some public meetings here, before we put something like this in place again, without really thinking it through. But it lacks validity research-wise, so just...
Well, I mean, this is based on what, I hear what you're saying in terms of a survey, getting a statistically valid survey, but in terms of research, actually a lot of peer research went into looking at what other cities are doing. It's something that's being pretty common, it's becoming more common across the U.S. to meet our housing needs as a city. I agree we need to be careful. I think you brought some good points. And that's why we want to send you all a draft to look at and give us feedback. If you want to have another, because I know we're running late, maybe one idea would be is us to send you the draft, and if you wanted to, we have a follow-up committee meeting, maybe to go over any comments that you have or questions, we'd be happy to do that.
I was thinking more in terms of you're sitting with council at a strategic planning meeting and just listening to us. I don't know that we were included in the survey. Maybe some of us were.
Yeah.
But we need to be careful. We're
Sure, I hear
growing
you.
and changing, and it's the thing about unintended consequences. So just a comment
Appreciate
for
it.
the record.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. John, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. I know that we're out of time.
Yep.
And I'm going to be realistic in this. So what I'd like to ask the council is that we have another planning and zoning meeting next week to cover some of our steep slope and floodplain discussion and updates. And I do need some head nods from the council that that's okay. Very good. Okay. So we'll go ahead and, Mr. Attorney, make that announcement. And if I do have Chairman Smith, you need to say a comment, sir? Go ahead.
Hey, John, you and I talked, and to make this as fast as possible, there was an idea that was brought up several weeks ago. At the time, I had not had a chance to really meet with anybody and discuss it in detail. So now that I have over the holidays, I would like, if it pleases the council, to ask RPA to work on a new tool that would allow special exceptions for contractor usage in C2. Very restrictive tool, but just flexible enough to allow just a slight extension of what is allowed dealing with possible outdoor storage and even mainly the number of employees that are allowed on site. So that's something you would look out for me?
Sure, I'm assuming council's in concurrence with that, I'd be happy to do it.
Very good.
All right. Thank you, sir.
John. If there are no other further
Thank you, Chair.
comments, you're welcome, sir. Thank you. Then I will adjourn us for 10 minutes until 6.
I was going to go on and on about how brilliant the idea was, but I didn't have time.
We still send it out.
Yeah.
And then I'll take 10 minutes.